Maybe the time is right for taking the train instead of that flight. Going more places, really getting around. So nice taking off and never leaving the ground. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard Amtrak. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard Amtrak. So much comfort, so much to see. Travel the way travel should be. Superliners, come see what we've done, making getting there part of the fun. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard Amtrak. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard Amtrak. Same old flights, same old planes. We'll have you seeing our brand new trains. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard Amtrak. All aboard.
Yo, what's up, guys? Happy 53 years old to Amtrak. It's or birthday, or I could say 53. Happy birthday, happy 53, happy birthday to to Amtrak, since Amtrak's now 53 years old. So yeah. All right, and today on this StreamYard, I'm gonna do the entrance of Amtrak reaction by Amtrak Guy 365. So be ready for it. Now, before I started, when did I catch this Amtrak first time in real life? When I was rail fitting in September 30th, 2023, on Chicago, on when I was on Chicago vacation last time. So yeah. I know Amtrak P42 or P40 DC locomotives still running in 2024 to this day. Oh yeah, just give me a second. Just give me a second. All right, I'm back. Sorry for waiting. I know there's no people in there, but I could do my reaction. So I'm just get ready. Oh, before I started, I'll say hi to hi Thomas. Anyways, now let's get started.
Well, well, isn't this just like old times? Let's just say your hour has come again. So wake up. Wake up and smell the ashes.
Huh? Whoa. Uh, Hello everyone. I'm AmtrakGuy365, and welcome back to the first edition of. Wait, no. Get this bad camcorder audio out of here.
Much better. But, what was this series called? Eggs of Amsterdam? Oh, I gotcha. Welcome to the first remade edition of Engines of Amtrak. In this series, as you may remember, I go over the various types of locomotives Amtrak has used over the years. Today, I'm here to talk about the EMD SDP 40F. But before we get into that, let me give some historical context on American railroads in the late 1960s. The railroads were suffering
dreadfully, and no one cares.
The locomotives being used dated back to the 1940s
That's
and
cool
even the
right here.
30s. Passenger cars were just as old as the locomotives themselves.
Henry James moment right here.
And becoming increasingly empty as Americans turned to the airlines and the growing interstate highway system. Track maintenance was also becoming rare as vegetation reestablished itself along railroad right-of-ways. The condition of many railroads' trackage also limited speeds of both freight and passenger trains. Once grand rail stations were also becoming shells of their former selves or shutting down outright. It wasn't until June 21st in 1970 when Penn Central, who was borderline bankrupt, filed to discontinue 34 of its passenger trains that the
Yeah, Penn Central always failures. That too much. S- since 1968, Pennsylvania Railroad and New York Central are merged into Penn Central back in 1968. But then on June 21st, 1970, the Penn Central already have bankrupt. That's way too far. But luckily on April 1st, 1976, uh, Conrail Conrail will take over Penn Central, and then after Conrail in 1999 of May 31st, CSX and Norfolk Southern are are now are now take over the Conrail, and then happened today. So yeah, this is why I don't like Penn Central. It always failures. That's that's why I hate that's why I don't like Penn Central. Oh yeah, speaking of Penn Central, baby, you could count on us. Anyways, let's get back to reaction of Amtrak.
The US government took matters into their own hands. A few months later, in October, the Rail Passenger Service Act was signed into law. This created the National Railroad Passenger Corporation, or NRPC. It would go under the brand name RailPax until being renamed Amtrak. This was a combination of the words America and RailPax until being renamed.
Oh, the Amtrak original name is Rail Packs. Then I never heard that before. Yeah.
named Amtrak. This was a combination of the words America and track. This new nationalized railroad system, supported by government and state funding, would assume control of intercity passenger trains across the country of railroads who were interested. Railroads could contract out Amtrak to completely take over ownership and operation of their trains starting on May 1st of 1971. Railroads who chose not to join, of which there were 6 out of the 26 who didn't, were required to operate their passenger services until 1975 and go through the Interstate Commerce Commission for any service cancellations or changes. Amtrak was met with much skepticism, with many not expecting it to last long at all. It was assumed the American public would forget about Amtrak and passenger trains altogether. Well, clearly that wasn't the case, as Amtrak began operations on May 1st of 1971 and would use a variety pack of inherited rail equipment with varying degrees of quality. This would be the case up until 1973. Amtrak couldn't rely on their 10 to 20-year-old F&E units anymore, as mechanically, they were just about done for. In November of 1972, Amtrak placed an order for 40 locomotives costing $18 million. Electromotive Division, or EMD, would build what would become known as the SDP-40F. Its mechanical design was based on the SD-40-2 and SDP-40, a passenger variant of the SD-40. EMD didn't want to design an entirely new passenger-exclusive diesel for Amtrak should the company falter. The cowl body was based on the FP-45 and F-45 locomotive used to power the Santa Fe Railway's exclusive Super Chief and El Capitan. This body type was perceived as more aesthetically pleasing when mixed with passenger trains. The units were also built for easy conversion to freight service should Amtrak cease operations, as was a common belief at the time. EMD's new product then went into service for Amtrak beginning in June of 1973. Regarding technical specifications, the SD stood for Special Duty, P for Passenger, 40 for Model 40, and F for having a full-width cowl.
Oh yeah, guys, what's your opinion on this locomotive? Let me know. Let me know in the comments or in a live chat. So yeah, special duty passenger model 40, full with body. So,
Body. The SDP-40F was rated for a top speed of 90.
top speed 95, 93, 103 miles per hour. 153, 166 kilometers per hour, EMT 645 E3, 60 cylinders, horsepower 3000, weight 396 pounds, length 72 feet, 10 feet for width, height it's 15 feet. 2 steam generators, or 1,350 US gallon. Horn lease line SL14. I never heard that before. So yeah.
5 to 103 miles an hour, and powered by an EMD 645 E3 16-cylinder engine producing 3,000 horsepower. The locomotive comes in at a hefty weight of 396,000 pounds. It has a length of 72 feet 4 inches, width of 10 feet 4 inches, and a height of 15 feet and 7 inches. The locomotive came equipped with 2 steam generators at the rear, along with a 1,350 US gallon water tank just ahead of them. This was due to Amtrak's inherited passenger equipment still being steam heated.
Oh gosh, what happened here? Yeah, I know it said heated. Yeah, I don't know what happened to it. So anyways.
Lastly, the units came equipped with a Leslie SL4T air horn. Here's a few samples.
I like that horn.
Initially, Amtrak placed their new locomotives out west exclusively. However, a second batch of SDP-40Fs numbering in at 110, costing $50 million, this brought Amtrak's total number of units to 150. They had the road numbers of 500 to 649. The second order, which went into service in 1974, allowed Amtrak to finally replace their aging F&E units across the country. These later units also had lower profile cooling fans and air horn to accommodate the tighter clearances seen throughout the East Coast. Trains magazine writer J. David Ingalls stated in 1975 that the SDP-40Fs were the stars of Amtrak's long-distance trains. They were slow to get going, but when they were moving, they could really move. Unfortunately, while they may have looked nice, they sure didn't ride nice. Engine
Wow.
crews frequently complained their big locomotives rode roughly compared to the F&E units they previously operated. Some crews even reported being thrown out of their seats. Then came the derailments.
Eesh, that happens to it. Bec- Yeah, that's why that loco are too heavy to use it. It looks remind me to pull the freight cars or something. So yeah, that's what happened to it.
This is the one thing that the SDP-40Fs are infamously known for. Between 1974 and 76, Amtrak, EMD, the Association of American Railroads, and the Federal Railroad Administration investigated to search for a cause to their rough riding and continuous derailments. The investigation revealed a number of possible causes. One was the constant lateral or side-to-side movement of water sloshing around in the steam generator's water tank. This would end up causing the locomotive to have more weight on one side than the other and sway and shake as it ran. One of the FRA's investigations figured that harmonic vibrations between the heavyweight SDP-40F and the lightweight passenger or baggage car behind it caused derailments. Hey, Amtrak, Guy365 here. Harmonic vibrations are an oscillating or continuous swaying motion resulting from a given force that can transfer to another object. Think of a
Reference fun. Hey, Michael here. That's kind of funny. Anyways.
simple pendulum. The force from one ball transfers to the others and acts on the other side with the same amount of force. This then repeats. In the case of the SDP-40F, the intense swaying and bouncing motion of the heavy locomotive transferred to the much lighter weight passenger car behind it. That amount of swaying and bouncing movement would cause the cars to jump the tracks.
Damn.
It's like dropping a bowling ball and golf ball from the same height. The golf ball bounces higher due to its light weight. In this case, the locomotive is the bowling ball, and the passenger car is the golf ball.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that was true because the big like the boring ball is the heaviest, but a golf ball is it's not a it's that was that one right here is heavy, but this is not heavy. So that's what happened to it. Anyways, that sounds true.
In short, weight distribution between the locomotive and the cars was very uneven.
Yeah, because this Amtrak locomotive right here has had 396,396,000 pounds of that, but this one only have 136,000 pounds. So yeah, that's what happened.
Then, another FRA investigation made a claim that the hollow bolster HTC trucks were to blame. The last cause, which was much more clear, was rough track conditions. Many, but not all railroads, struggled to keep up and pay for track maintenance during this period. The Santa Fe, for example, didn't have much, if anything, to complain about regarding the big Amtrak units. On the flip side, Burlington Northern, the Chessie System, and Louisville and Nashville experienced major issues with the 40Fs. To combat these problems, Amtrak enforced slower speeds on curves and modified the locomotive's truck design. While this helped reduce incidents, the units had already created a ruined reputation for themselves. In 1976, the Chessie System had outright banned the units from their tracks, calling them rail breakers. They suspected rails were spread apart from the locomotive's lateral swaying. Amtrak's Empire Builder would then experience a 6-hour increase in travel time as a result of speed restrictions as well. By 1975, the GEP-30CH had entered service to supplement the failing SDP-40Fs, but Amtrak knew they still needed another new locomotive. In turn, the F40PH was ordered beginning on May 8, 1975. It would soon begin to displace the SDP-40Fs on not only long-distance trains, but shorter inner-city trains as well. The locomotive was further made obsolete as more of Amtrak's then new Amfleet 1 passenger cars went into service outside of the Northeast Corridor in 1976 and 77. They had been expedited into service due to the unusually harsh winter that season, putting much of the steam-heated equipment out of service. These Amfleet cars came equipped with head-end power, or HEP for short. New superliners commonly used out west also featured HEP. In short, the F40PH came equipped with head-end power, the SDP-40Fs did not. It was clear who the winner was. In 1977, Amtrak traded in 40 of their 40Fs back to EMD. Components from these locomotives, including the prime mover, would be used in a series of F40s known as the F40PHR, R meaning built from SDP-40F parts. In the following years up until 1987, Amtrak traded in a total of 132 units back into EMD for F40PHRs. Also during this time in 1984, Amtrak was experiencing a light engine shortage. In turn, they traded in 18 SDP-40F to the Santa Fe Railway in exchange for 25 CF7s and 18 SSB 1200s. In 1985, the Santa Fe began converting their Amtrak engines for use in freight service. These were designated SDF-40-2. This involved removing the steam generators along with re-gearing them for slower speeds. Other modifications included adding a railing for the narrow front-end platform, adding concrete ballast in place of lost weight from the steam generator and water tank, removal of a nose light, steam generator-related parts being plated over, among other smaller changes. They proved much more reliable, having none of the problems Amtrak did when they owned them. The only issue proved to be the removal of a nose light created glare in the cab during adverse weather conditions, along with mounting and dismounting the unit. The SDF-40-2's front steps were more or less a small vertical ladder rather than steps. This proved especially risky during rolling or on-the-move crew changes. Meanwhile, back on Amtrak, the remaining 40Fs had been reduced to work trains or stored away. The last 9 SDP-40Fs would finally be retired off of Amtrak's roster in 1987. Those not traded into EMD or sold to the Santa Fe were likely scrapped. Retrospectively, some of those who operated the big diesels think they would have survived longer had the steam heating tech been removed and HEP been implemented. In 1988, the Santa Fe began to remedy some of the lingering problems with their modified units. They re-implemented the nose light to reduce glare in the cab, and later that year they added notches on both sides of the nose. This once again allowed crews to mount the unit and enter through the nose as was preferred. In 1995, after the Burlington Northern Railroad and Santa Fe merged to create Burlington Northern Santa Fe, the SDF-40-2s were renumbered to BNSF specifications. However, the first unit would be retired in 1999 after a low-speed derailment bent the frame and experienced significant body damage. By November 2001, the locomotives began to be put into storage at Kansas City and Barstow for the last time. All units were officially retired on May 2, 2002, and were moved to Topeka, Kansas in August for part harvesting. That fall, scrapping commenced.
That's kind of sad.
However, not all is doom and gloom for Amtrak's hefty passenger units. In June 2002, BNSF 6976, formerly Amtrak 644, was pulled out of storage and sent to the National Railway Equipment Shop in Mount Vernon, Illinois. There it was painted up as a display locomotive for the grand opening of Maersk's Pier 400 container terminal at the Port of Los Angeles in August. The scheme was reminiscent of Santa Fe's war bonnet design. The cold and dead unit was moved around by NS 3329, which was also decked out in Maersk colors. 6976 made one last public appearance at the opening of BNSF's Logistics Park Intermodal Facility in Joliet, Illinois on October 14, 2002. The unit was then once again moved to storage in Topeka with an uncertain fate. However, the Northwest Railway Museum acquired the locomotive in November 2003, numbered it back to its original road number of 644, and moved it to Portland, Oregon. There it would be repainted with unlicensed Maersk colors. 644 would be designated for Daylight Locomotives and Machine Works Incorporated, or DLMX, and saw service on the Portland and Western Railroad throughout the mid to late 2000s and early 2010s. It would then be kept at storage in Portland. In January of 2014, Dynamic Rail Preservation, or Dyna-Rail, moved the 644 to Ogden Union Station in Ogden, Utah. Tagging along was ex-Amtrak F40PHR number 231. The 644 was now lettered for DYRX and was intended to be restored to its original Amtrak appearance. 644 and 231 then sat stagnant for several years until January of 2019. Dyna-Rail, in conjunction with the Nevada State Railroad Museum in Carson City, moved the engines to the museum to be restored to operation. In June 2019, 644 was renumbered back to 6976 to honor its BNSF heritage. In late 2019, the unit ran under its own power once more, with more successful tests continuing into early 2020. However, 644 isn't alone. Two other SDP-40Fs seem to still exist, with those being 169 and 218. These became EMD test units in the early 80s, but not much information is available on them. Apart from this Google Maps imagery located at the Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado, I haven't been able to find much info or photos regarding their current whereabouts. It's said that they're currently heavily modified testbed units operating at the TTC in Pueblo. Well, that's quite a positive ending to such an infamous and ill-fated locomotive. While not the most successful locomotive, it still has plenty of fans out there and was definitely able to leave its mark and impact on the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this remade version of Engines of Amtrak, the SDP-40F episode. As you may know, the original was taken down for copyright reasons, but regardless of that, Engines of Amtrak is back in business.
No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me!
I hope you all enjoyed, and stay tuned for next time when I discuss the EMD F59 PHI. Thank you again for watching.
So yeah, that's an episode. That's all about this episode 1 of Entrance of Amtrak SDP-40F. So let's try. What do you think of this locomotive? Anyways, let's go to next episode, shall we?
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be rediscussing the Turboliner train sets. This is a remake of the original episode that you can still watch as of the making of this video, but I felt it was time to remake the old episodes of the series because some of the information isn't always quite accurate, and my script writing and editing abilities have greatly improved since then as well. Anyway, let's get right into the episode. From Amtrak's inception in 1971 throughout the early part of the decade, the railroad was fumbling with rustic and antiquated equipment dating back to the 1940s and 50s. Amtrak did finally get their first brand new locomotive in 1973 in the form of the EMD SDP-40F. However, due to its rather heavy weight and the rough track conditions of the time leading to several derailments, it was proving to be a disaster.
Yeah.
The units were also more commonly employed on Western long-distance trains, often leaving old equipment to handle the inner-city trains. On top of this, mounting pressure was placed on Amtrak as the general public began to think the railroad was just merely making cosmetic changes to worn-down equipment, as in, stamping their logo and paint onto aging equipment. It was with this that a new type of motive power was necessary to further displace the remaining F&E units and to improve Amtrak's image. This time, the railroad would place focus on faster inner-city trains outside the Northeast Corridor. Amtrak had inherited Eastern and Midwestern turbo train service, which made use of a fast gas turbine train set built by the United Aircraft Corporation. Using this as a general basis, Amtrak decided another gas turbine train set was in order to modernize their fleet. Meanwhile, in Europe, experiments in high-speed rail were being undertaken, so Amtrak turned to them for answers. This resulted in Amtrak leasing two Class T2000 RTG train sets from France built by A&F Industry in August 1973 for $85,000 a month. These sets were used in turbo train service on the French National Railway on their higher-speed inner-city routes, reaching speeds of 75 to 99 miles per hour. Amtrak found the RTGs rather reliable and ordered two 5-car Americanized Class T2000s. These would inaugurate a new line of turboliner services. The turboliners were expected to be more cost-effective to operate compared to the average diesel locomotive with conventional passenger cars, and with their lighter weight, it would lead to less wear and tear on railroad tracks. They would also be able to operate faster, in theory. More on that later, and take curves quicker as well. As for the Americanizations, the turboliners weren't modified too much apart from knuckle couplers on the power cars and a new horn. Interestingly though, the sets would retain their European buffer and turnbuckle coupling system between the passenger cars. Speaking of passenger cars, the 5-car set consisted of a combined power and passenger car, a coach, a snack car, another coach, and then another combined power and passenger car. With technical specifications in mind, the RTGs were rated for a top speed of 125 miles per hour using a Turbo Mecha Turbo 3 turboshaft engine, producing 1,140 horsepower for each power car, totaling 2,280 horsepower. The full set weighed in at 586,000 pounds. The sets came in at a length of 430 feet, a width of 9 feet.
Oh yeah, horn P1234. P1234A5. I never heard that horn either. So yeah.
5.5 inches, and a height of 14 feet. They came equipped with a Nathan P1234A5 air horn. Here's a sample. Amtrak began heralding the turboliners as the biggest travel news since the 747. A&F's turboliners would arrive on Amtrak in mid-1973, with the first test service between Chicago, Illinois and St. Louis, Missouri, occurring on September 28, 1973. Official service would begin later on October 1st of that year. The press and passengers found Amtrak's new equipment quite attractive, praising the ride comfort, especially on rough tracks, the higher speeds cutting down travel times by 30 minutes at times, the large window sizes, and overall reliability. However, they were faulted for their seat comfort, small walkways, and difficult to traverse vestibules. Another thing was Amtrak obtained a permanent waiver from the Federal Railroad Administration, exempting the RTG sets from the buff strength requirement of 800,000 pounds. This led some engineers to feel uncomfortable or unsafe in the case of a collision. On another note, the turboliners were also the first to be painted in a new paint scheme for Amtrak, that being Phase 2. With such high praise and reliability, Amtrak purchased 4 more turboliners for service between Chicago and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, along with Chicago and Detroit, Michigan. These would enter service in 1975. The total cost for the 6 sets was $18 million. The sets were numbered 58 to 69. Amtrak considered an additional 14 RTGs for the Northeast Corridor, but this would have required a raise in train fares between Boston, Massachusetts, and New York City. The United States Department of Transportation would ultimately block this proposal. Meanwhile, Amtrak had established an exclusive maintenance facility for the turboliners in the Brighton Park neighborhood of Chicago, within a former Gulf Mobile and Ohio Railroad coach yard. But just as soon as the turboliners were proving themselves well, they were already running into some issues or being replaced. One issue was poor track conditions limited track speed between Chicago and St. Louis to 79 miles an hour. An attempt to increase this to 90 miles per hour was blocked by the Federal Railroad Administration, citing inadequate signaling. Another issue was due to the sets being permanently connected. They couldn't add additional coaches when service demanded it, leading to a max passenger capacity of 292. The turboliners were also being replaced with conventional equipment in the form of the then new EMD F40PH and Amfleet coaches, which were proving more flexible to operate and could adjust to the increasing travel demand. The St. Louis turboliners were replaced with conventional equipment in 1975, and one of Detroit's turboliners was replaced in 1976. Despite this, turboliner service would receive an overhaul and an extended career in the form of the RTL train set. Between 1976 and 77, at a cost of $32 million, 7 new RTL train sets went into service, being numbered 150 to 163, later 2150 to 2163. They were based on the RTG design, but instead built by Rohr Industries in Chula Vista, California. They had the same concepts, but compared to the RTGs, the RTLs had an all-American coupling system, along with a new power car design and Phase 3 paint scheme. They were slightly wider at 10 feet to accommodate more seats, the coach floor height was raised for the Northeast Corridor's high-level platforms, and the RTLs were third-rail compatible for Grand Central Station and later Penn Station, though were limited to 45 miles per hour in this mode. Interestingly though, the RTLs held only 264 passengers compared to the RTG's 292. A new maintenance facility for the sets opened up in Rensselaer, New York on November 30th, 1977, costing $15 million. The first RTL set ran on September 18th to the 19th in 1976, with regular service on the Empire Corridor beginning on September 20th. This was met with an extensive advertising campaign parading the RTLs as the future of train travel. Initially, the sets were based between New York to Albany and Buffalo. In March 1977, the New York to Montreal, Quebec Adirondack services, conventional equipment was replaced with an RTL, leaving most upstate New York Amtrak trains using the new sets. The Midwest would later receive RTL sets as well, with destinations to Detroit, Milwaukee, and Port Huron. But as the 1970s transitioned into the 1980s, what was going on with the original RTG sets? Well, they were starting to run into some more issues. It now wasn't uncommon to hear about an RTG breaking down in the winter months, and the fixed passenger capacity was very much a burden during peak travel periods. On top of this, conventional equipment was also found to be more cost-effective than a gas turbine train set. By 1981, Midwestern Turboliner service, using both RTGs and RTLs, was replaced altogether with conventional equipment. With that came the closure of the Turboliner facility in Chicago, and the old RTGs were sent to Amtrak's Beech Grove, Indiana shops for storage. This left the East Coast as the sole region of operation for the Turboliners after 1981. However, 3 of the stored RTGs were rebuilt to RTL specifications at Beech Grove for Empire Corridor service, now designated as RTG-2. Unfortunately, the rebuild success was short-lived, as after the RTGs entered service in 1988, poor and insufficient maintenance led to multiple fire incidents between 1993 and 94. This led to their retirement after one caught fire in Penn Station on September 11, 1994. Despite this, Amtrak still found the Rohr-built RTL turboliners useful in the Northeast and embarked on a refurbishment program in the mid to late 1990s. Thus, in 1995, an RTL was rebuilt with a new turbine and now consumed less fuel, had a renovated interior, and was given a new paint scheme. This became the RTL-2. Later in 1998, Amtrak and the state of New York initiated the High-Speed Rail Improvement Program, which involved allocating $185 million to improve service over the Empire Corridor. This included rebuilding the 7 RTL train sets into RTL-3 standards with a new Acela-style paint scheme. Super Steel Schenectady was to rebuild the sets, planned for 1999 service, but numerous delays pushed this back to 2003. During tests in February 2001, the RTL-3 reached 125 miles per hour. The first set entered revenue service on April 14, 2003. A deal was made where New York would take ownership of the turboliner sets as soon as Amtrak cleared them for service. This didn't exactly go to plan, though, as Amtrak suddenly pulled the sets from service in June 2003 due to air conditioning problems. The next year, in 2004, New York sued Amtrak in federal court for $477 million under the reasoning that Amtrak was failing to operate the turboliners, along with not completing track work permitting 125 mile per hour operation on the Empire Corridor. Then Commissioner of the New York State Department of Transportation, Joseph H. Boardman, who later became an Amtrak president, accused then Amtrak President David Gunn of stealing the train sets and threatened to find a new operator for intercity passenger rail in New York. In the meantime, Amtrak used conventional equipment to fill in for the turboliner service. New York reached a settlement with Super Steel in April 2005 to cancel the RTL-3 project for $5.5 million, forcing them to stop work and cover any remaining costs. In turn, the 4 unfinished train sets were moved into storage at a nearby industrial park. Amtrak and New York settled their case in 2007, with Amtrak paying the state $20 million. For years, the turboliner sat in storage until 2012. The state of New York was paying $150,000 per year to store the unused RTL sets, and thus auctioned off its 4 surplus turboliner sets in 2012 for $420,000. This would include spare parts, and scrapping later began in 2013. The remaining 3 RTL train sets were stored at Bear, Delaware until January 2018, when one set was moved to Cedar Hill Yard in New Haven, Connecticut. The other 2 were transferred to Adams Yard in North Brunswick, New Jersey, where they remain in storage as of the making of this video. The fate of the turboliner seemed hopeful. Perhaps they might still be running today if technical and legal issues were avoided. But in the end, scrap and storage would take hold. Even still, the turboliner showed the general public that Amtrak was more than capable of holding their own, instead of merely running a ragtag gallery of battered, unreliable equipment. Amtrak could now prove confident and optimistic, having something new and reliable to show for themselves. Their distinct 1970s and 80s appearance are a symbol of the times, but they were certainly able to make their mark on the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Before I get to the credits and reveal the next episode remake, I'd like to thank Skillshare for sponsoring another episode.
Hold on a second, I just realized. What the heck is this?
I get to the credits and reveal the next episode remake.
I am dead. Okay, hahaha. What is... I think that's memes right here. Yeah, I don't know why. Anyways.
I'd like to look class for stuck in 8 years of as I said in this video. Thanks for watching this remade episode of Engines of Amtrak. As I said at the beginning, the original episode, now going on 4 years old, is still currently available for viewing as of the making of this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and stay tuned for next time when I rediscuss the General Electric E60. Thank you again for watching.
Yeah. I think that locomotive. I think this one are okay, in my opinion. So yeah. Anyways, let's watch another one. And now let's watch episode 3.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be rediscussing the Bud Metroliner. This is a remake of the original episode you can still watch as of the making of this video. During the mid-1960s, passenger rail in the United States was really starting to fall apart. Equipment and infrastructure was old, and highways and airlines were taking over. Meanwhile, in Europe and Asia, however, innovations in rail technology were being undertaken. Most notably was Japan's Shinkansen high-speed bullet train racing up to 130 miles per hour. Back in the US, the High-Speed Ground Transportation Act of 1965 was pending in the government. It was set to kickstart the growth of high-speed rail in the US after seeing what Japan had accomplished. Representatives from the Pennsylvania Railroad, United States Department of Transportation, and a private consulting firm began discussing specifications for a high-speed electric multiple unit train set, or EMU. But disagreements were commonplace during its development. The PRR wanted cab cars on both ends for flexible operations, while US DOT wanted 4-car sets. 2-car sets with cabs on each end was chosen as a compromise. Soon after, though, the High-Speed Ground Transportation Act was signed into law on September 30th, 1965, and then-President Lyndon Johnson pushed the project with an aggressive schedule. In order to test the Northeast Corridor's feasibility for high-speed rail, 4 modified Bud Silverliners numbered T1 to T4 were ordered to reach speeds of 150 miles per hour. Initial tests fell short of this until a semi-streamlined slab was placed on the front end, allowing the set to top out at 156 miles per hour. On May 6, 1966, the High-Speed Ground Transportation Project ordered 50 new EMU cars to be built by the Bud Company. The order was delivered in September 1967, with the new trains being named Metroliners. It consisted of 20 coach cars with Westinghouse propulsion systems, and 20 snack bar coaches, and 10 parlor cars with General Electric propulsion systems. As for technical specifications, the Metroliners were rated for a top speed of 150 miles per hour. The coach
I see the horn. Lee Sly S55 or /37. I never heard of these horn either. I think. Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, I never heard that horn name before. Anyways,
coaches produced 1,200 horsepower, while the snack and parlor cars produced 1,020 horsepower. They weighed in at 166,000 pounds. Each car came in at a length of 85 feet, a width of 10 feet 6 inches, and a height of 14 feet 10 inches. The Metroliners came equipped with shrill-sounding Leslie horns. Here's a few samples. A planned service start date was set for October 1967, but multiple issues with the control and propulsion system at 70 miles per hour pushed the date back to January 1968. In November of 1967, the Pennsylvania Railroad began testing its first 2 cars on their main line. The cars reached 125 miles per hour, but topped out at 164 miles per hour near Princeton Junction in New Jersey during another test. Though that same test proved the cars wouldn't be able to operate anywhere near that speed in revenue service. In December, tests where the Metroliners passed by the early 1900s built MP54 EMUs revealed the Metroliners would rip out the windows on the MP54 due to a sudden pressure drop. Given these issues, revenue service would not begin in January 1968 as planned. On February 1st that year, the Pennsylvania Railroad and New York Central merged to create Penn Central, so any Metroliners going forward were delivered with Penn Central markings, but retained the PRR pinstriping. The first GE-powered Metroliners arrived for testing in March, with their pantographs proving more successful. The Westinghouse-powered ones bounced on the old overhead wires and often drew out high currents because of improperly designed transformers. Other issues with electric arcing on longer combined train sets further delayed entering service. After electrical substation modifications and a legal settlement between Penn Central and the Budd Company, Penn Central announced Metroliner service to begin on January 16, 1969. A VIP train from Washington, D.C. to New York City operated on January 15th, with the first revenue train finally running the next day as a 6-car set as a single round trip in the afternoon. However, problems like the sets sucking out the MP54's windows still occurred. An 8-car set was trialed on February 5th, but it caused several circuit breaker trips and catenary outages. Metroliner service slowly increased, but the Federal Railroad Administration had limited the sets to no more than 110 miles per hour. But even with this setback, they still ranked in as North America's fastest train at the time. However, though, this was still a fair bit short of beating out Japan's Shinkansen operating speed as originally intended. But despite this and the 1800s infrastructure and legacy signaling systems hampering Metroliner operation, the service proved incredibly popular amongst American commuters. By 1971, half of Metroliner passengers had switched to it from other methods, with many being on business trips. The 7 operating trains had 90% on-time performance, and Capitol Beltway Station was open to serve all Metroliners. But problems with the sets persisted behind the scenes. As more Westinghouse-powered sets completed testing, Penn Central refused to accept them due to overheating during frequent stops and worse acceleration than the older Silverliners. They would eventually enter service between Washington, D.C. and New York City regardless. However, by mid-1970, Metroliner out-of-service rates had hit 40%, and their top speed was reduced to 100 miles per hour, not much faster than a conventional passenger train. A change for the Metroliners was required and came in the form of Amtrak, the new national passenger railroad operator created on May 1, 1971. Amtrak took over Penn Central's Metroliner cars and increased service to 12 trains in November. The railroad considered converting Metroliner service into a conventional locomotive and coach service, but the Metroliners were Amtrak's only relatively new piece of equipment at the time, so they decided against it. Amtrak was pleased with the Metroliner car design and heavily based their soon-to-be massive fleet of Amfleet coaches upon it in 1973. Meanwhile, Amtrak had started rebuilding Metroliner sets with new paint and improved reliability, and thus increased marketing for the Metroliners. They were touted as America's fastest train and said to be much more convenient than the northeastern US's congested highways. Several Metroliner sets had accumulated over 11 million miles in revenue service and were in need of repairs. A noticeable change was the dynamic braking resistors and air intakes being relocated to the roof with a streamlined hump. This reduced overheating and snow ingestion issues that were prevalent when it was mounted under the car body. Amtrak's rebuilt cars had a maximum speed of 130 miles per hour, but still only ran at 100 miles per hour. By the end of 1975, the sets had a lower out-of-service rate of 27.5%, but many trains ran with fewer cars than demand called for. In February 1976, Amtrak reduced Metroliner service from 15 to 13 round trips due to the lack of available cars during rebuilds. But as Amtrak was continuing to rebuild the Metroliners, replacements were already on the horizon. In 1976, Amtrak sought to replace their aging 1930s-built GG1s and unreliable E60 electric locomotives on conventional services. One of the test subjects brought over from Europe, the Swedish RC4, was able to match a Metroliner's timetable with Amfleet coaches. Despite this, Amtrak considered ordering 118 new Metroliner 2s, but ultimately scrapped this idea as on-time performance with them dropped from 81 to 46%. Conventional locomotives with Amfleets were proving to have a better on-time rate of performance. Amtrak soon initiated a $24.4 million fleet renewal program in 1977, with Metroliner sets being shipped off to GE for refurbishment. 8 GG1s were re-geared for 110 mile/hour operation with Amfleets as a replacement for the Metroliner service. Rebuilt Metroliners entered service in May 1979, with 37 being completed by November. The remaining 24 rebuilds were canceled though. In 1980, the new EMD AEM-7 entered revenue service and could reach speeds of 125 miles per hour with Amfleets, easily outdoing the current Metroliner EMUs. AEM-7s were placed on the Metroliner service as it increased from 12 to 14 trains by October. In late 1980, additional equipment was needed on the electrified portion of the Keystone Corridor between Philadelphia and Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. In 1978, Amtrak had leased out New Jersey Transit Silverliners and Arrows to run the Keystone Corridor, as New Jersey Transit awaited their own electrification project to be completed. Amtrak's GG1s and E60s were unreliable, and the railroad was desperate for electric power on the line. After returning the equipment to NJT throughout 1980, the only available Amtrak power was the Metroliners. Test runs of the set on the corridor began in January 1981, with revenue service beginning in February, despite tests a decade prior proving that the cars were not suitable for the service with low acceleration and overheating during stop-and-go operations. The Metroliner EMUs on the Keystone service would be rebranded as Capital Liners. The last run of Metroliner EMUs as a whole on the Metroliner service ran on October 23, 1981. Metroliner service had now finally been taken over by AEM-7s with Amfleets. But by the mid to late 1980s, the Keystone Corridor Metroliner sets had become so unreliable that AEM-7s often towed the sets with their pantographs still raised to supply lighting and heating. By February 1988, Keystone service trains were converted to diesel power and made the Metroliner EMU sets practically obsolete, apart from being used as standard coaches for a little bit. Despite the sets no longer being the poster boy of the Northeast Corridor, that being taken over by the AEM-7, the Metroliners would find an extended service life. After being stored at Amtrak's Wilmington and Bear, Delaware shop complexes, Amtrak found themselves with a surplus of what were essentially Amfleet coaches. Thus, in 1988, 29 Metroliners were stripped of their propulsion systems, repainted, and converted into cab cars for push-pull operation. These were used on corridor service trains on the West and East Coast, and Chicago-based trains. Other cars were converted for testing and private use by Amtrak. Penn Central Snack Bar car number 860 would be sent to the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania, and any others would be scrapped. As for the Metroliner service itself, it would be discontinued after being displaced by the 150 mph Acela Express service by 2006. Regardless, the former Metroliner cab cars continue to serve Amtrak on the Keystone service, Valley Flyer, and Hartford line, painted in modern colors with K5LA air horns even after around 50 years of revenue service. However, this isn't to last. In July 2021, Amtrak announced a plan with Siemens to replace their entire fleet of Amfleets and former Metroliner cab cars with Siemens Venture train sets consisting of a locomotive, coaches, and some with a cab car. These are set for delivery in 2024, with revenue service to begin in the mid-2020s into the early 2030s. While the Metroliners no longer parade the Northeast Corridor as their own EMU set as the poster boy for the Northeast Corridor, they paved the way for high-speed trains in the U.S., as one of America's first high-speed trains, despite their many issues and speed restrictions. Even after being retired from their original service, they continue on in push-pull operation on fast corridor trains. Despite the idea of replacement looming in the future, the Metroliners have definitely left their mark, and still continue to leave their mark, on the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak. Like I said earlier, you can still go watch the original episode as of the making of this one. Not really sure why you'd want to go watch it again because it kinda sucks in my opinion, but so be it. But either way, thanks to those who sent in pictures and videos of the cab cars to be used in this episode as well. Stay tuned for next time where I'll rediscuss the EMD AEM-7. Thank you again for watching.
Okay, that's an episode. Wait. So that was episode 3. Yeah. But next one will be episode 4. It's called Amtrak GE60. Let's watch episode 4. Let's watch it.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be rediscussing the General Electric E60. This is a remake of the original episode you can still watch as of the making of this one. In the eastern United States, the Northeast Corridor in the early 1970s was looking pretty dated, especially the trains themselves. Most mainline passenger service in the area was divided between the mechanically unreliable Bud Metroliner sets and the aging General Electric GG1s. The GG1s were nearing 40 years old by the 70s. That also meant Amtrak was to inherit a fleet of them. Knowing their age, the railroad could either rebuild them or find a new locomotive. Amtrak went with the latter option, but there was a catch. No locomotive builder in the US offered a passenger-exclusive electric locomotive at the time in 1973. Meanwhile, in the western deserts of the US, though, the brand new 78-mile Black Mesa and Lake Powell Railroad, or BM&LP for short, had just opened up for business. The railroad would haul heavy coal loads between Peabody Energy's Kayenta mine near Kayenta, Arizona, to the Navajo Generating Station power plant at Page, Arizona. The line was completely isolated from the rest of the American rail network and used a new type of dual-cab electric locomotive known as the E60C, built by General Electric. Prior to the BM&LP's E60s entering service, though, GE had proposed a passenger variant of the engine. Amtrak during this time was short on options as the GG1 was old. Importing a locomotive from Europe would take 3 years for production time, while GE promised a locomotive for Amtrak within a year. The railroad went with GE and decided to adapt the E60C for passenger service. Throughout 1973, Amtrak would order a total of 26 units at a cost of $18.4 million. Initially, 15 would come equipped with standard steam heating technology for Amtrak's older inherited coaches known as the E60CP, while 11 would come equipped with the newer head-end power electrical system known as the E60CH. However, 9 of the steam-heated units were changed to HEP as Amtrak increased its order of new HEP-equipped Amfleet coaches. The idea was that the E60, paired with up to 18 coaches reaching speeds of 120 miles per hour, could replace the GG1 in Metroliner sets. As for technical specifications, the E in E60 stood for electric, 60 for 6,000 horsepower, C for the C-C wheel arrangement, and P for being a passenger variant of the unit, or H for being equipped with head-end power. They were rated for a top speed of 120 miles per hour and produced 6,000 horsepower. They weighed in at 387,000 pounds. They came in at a length of 71 feet 3 inches, width of 10 feet 7 inches, and a height of 14 feet 7 inches. The locomotives came equipped with a Nathan P01235 air horn. Here's an example. Air horn. Here's an example.
Oh yeah, my favorite horn. Oh yeah, on A60 horn, in my opinion, it was fantastic. In my opinion, because the horn is Nathan P01235 is my favorite horn on E60. E60. So yeah, my favorite horn on this locomotive. Anyway, so let's listen to it.
Example. Amtrak's E60 units were delivered starting in November 1974, being numbered 950 to 975, and were the first locomotives to feature the railroad's new Phase 2 paint scheme. But as was common with early new Amtrak equipment, the E60 ran into some troubles. During the last test run on February 24, 1975, the locomotive derailed at 100 miles per hour on the Northeast Corridor, but remained upright. Similar to the problematic EMD SDP-40F diesel, the E60s were rather heavy. Their 387,000-pound weight compared to the 40F's.
Yeah, that's true. The both are heavy, but the most heavier is this locomotive. It's I don't know what locomotive name is, but anyway, they had 396 pounds, while this one only had 387 pounds. I mean, this locomotive have more heavier than this locomotive. So they both had too many also both had accidents, like back then. So that's what. So yeah, that's what happened to this. Anyways, let's continue.
396,000 pounds was even less optimal for the E60's regularly fast trains. Also similar was the E60's being more suited for freight than passenger trains. The E60's tended to sway side to side while accelerating and at speeds over 100 miles per hour, which put stress on the rails. The Federal Railroad Administration investigated the test run derailment and revealed the root of the issue was the locomotive truck design. After this, the FRA placed an 80 mile per hour restriction on the E60. Amtrak found this unacceptable and sought to fix the truck problem prior to entering revenue service. By November 1975, the FRA was satisfied with the truck design changes and raised the restriction to 85 miles per hour. With that, Amtrak placed their new units into revenue service, pulling both steam-heated and Amfleet trains. Amtrak wanted to clear the locomotives for 110-mile-per-hour operation, but truly was never confident in their performance. Swaying was still a bit of an issue, and the units sometimes rode roughly. So, Amtrak turned to Europe for an answer to their electric locomotive woes. Between 1976 and 77, the Swedish RC4 and French CC21000 were trialed on the NEC to find a more permanent electric unit solution. This would lead to the development of the much more successful EMD AEM7 entering service in 1980. However, even with the AEM7's introduction, the E60 still had plenty of power left in them. In 1982, 2 of Amtrak's units went to the Navajo Mining Railroad, and 10 went to New Jersey Transit in 1984 for use on the North Jersey coastline. Amtrak's remaining 13 units went in for a bit of an overhaul between 1986 and 88. They were given head-end power, re-geared for 90 miles per hour, renumbered 600 to 610 and 620 to 621, painted into Phase 3, and were now designated E60MA, MA standing for motor alternating. 600 to 610 had their weight reduced to 366,000 pounds, while 620 and 621 retained their 387,000 pound weight for primary use on work trains. With all of this said, their performance improved a bit. They also sometimes would be seen in push-pull operation on the Keystone service and powering rush-hour clocker trains. They would soldier around throughout the 1990s and early 2000s alongside the AEM7, HHP8, and even the Acela Express. But by 2003, the big electric bricks were aged and it was time for them to be retired. After a 28-year career in 2003, all of Amtrak's E60s would be retired. All but one would be scrapped throughout 2004. In April 2004, the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania acquired number 603 and placed it on static display. Meanwhile, the Navajo Mining Railroad's Amtrak's units were scrapped in 2003, and New Jersey Transit had retired their units by 1998. NJT number 958 was preserved by the United Railroad Historical Society of New Jersey. The Black Mesa and Lake Powell Railroad's closure in 2019 meant the end of operating the E60s that started it all. Fortunately, though, number 6001 has found a new static display home at the developing Arizona State Railroad Museum. Finally, as of the making of this video, the 33-mile Deseret Power Railroad, also isolated from the American Rail Network, continues to use a fleet of E60 locomotives. In the end, Amtrak's E60s were unfortunately just a bit too rough riding, too heavy, and freight-oriented for use as a truly reliable high-speed passenger locomotive, with the AEM7 winning out in the end. While the units found life elsewhere for a time, at the very least, one of Amtrak's is still preserved for all to see how the E60 left its mark on the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this remade episode of Engines of Amtrak. As I said at the beginning, the original episode from 2017 is still currently available for viewing as of the making of this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and stay tuned for next time when I rediscuss when I discuss the New York Central Hudson. Okay, so basically to explain what just happened there, I'm going to try making an episode of Engines of New York Central to see how you all like it, considering I said I would make it back in 2018, and I think it's about time that it finally gets made. But after that episode, I'll go back to Engines of Amtrak and do the Metroliner. Thank you again for watching.
Yeah, that's the episode 4. And I like the E60 because the reason why I like the E60 because in my opinion it will be the horn. Sounds like amazing. Anyways, let's watch episode 5. It's called GEP30CH horn. Let's shall we?
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here. On this edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be taking a look at the General Electric P30CH. This is another remade episode as the original, as you may know, was taken down off of YouTube. It was 1974 and the only diesel locomotives Amtrak had rostered for mainline passenger trains were rustic F&E units along with the now problematic SDP-40F. On top of this, Amtrak was to receive new Amfleet passenger cars that could only be powered with an electric generator car or a locomotive equipped with head-end power, otherwise known as HEP. Amtrak, of which, lacked any diesels equipped with HEP. With over 200 Amfleets on order and expected to arrive in 1975, Amtrak needed a brand new locomotive that could pull these cars and replace the aging F&E units. With that said, Amtrak ordered 25 General Electric built P-30CH locomotives in 1974, costing $500,000 each. It would be the first all-new locomotive specifically made for Amtrak. One note, though, was its design was based upon the relatively successful freight diesel, the U-30C, that of which had its own passenger variant, the U-30CG, used by the Santa Fe Railway. The aesthetic design of the P-30CH definitely takes some inspiration from its former. Regarding technical specifications, the P stands for passenger, 30 for 3,000 horsepower, C for the C-C 6-axle wheel arrangement, and H for being equipped with head-end power. The units were numbered 700 to 724. It's rated for a top speed of 103 miles an hour, being powered by a GE 7FDL 16-cylinder engine, producing 3,000 horsepower. It weighs in at 386,000 pounds. It has a length of 72 feet 4 inches, a width of 10 feet 8.8 inches, and a height of 15 feet 4.5 inches. The locomotive is equipped with head-end power using 2 Detroit diesel generator sets rated at 375 kilowatts each. The units came equipped with either a Nathan P5A or K5LA air horn. Here's a few samples. The P-30s first went into service in August 1975 after number 700 was built in July and painted into the Phase 2 scheme. The rest of the order would go into service throughout the year and into January 1976. They'd soon gain the nickname Pooch, based upon their large nose and performance, along with the designation somewhat resembling the word. Initially, the units were put onto corridor trains like the Hilltopper, James Whitcomb Riley, later known as the Cardinal, Blue Ridge, Calumet, Mountaineer, and State House. Soon enough, though, Amtrak put the units onto longer distance trains like the Panama Limited and the Washington, D.C. to Savannah, Georgia segment of the Palmetto. Most units, though, stuck around east of the Mississippi River during the first few years in service. By 1978, though, Amtrak leased 15 units out to the Southern Pacific Railroad for use on the Peninsula commute service between San Francisco and San Jose, California. These replaced the SDP-45s previously used on the trains. The P-30CHs would be returned to Amtrak in 1979. However, as time went on into the early 80s, crews had accumulated mostly complaints regarding the engines. For starters, Amtrak didn't send the units in for maintenance as much as they should have, leading to frequent mechanical and reliability issues, those of which included delayed dynamic brake response, HEP failures, and the truck design, which is similar to the electric E60 and was more suited for freight service, caused the units to ride roughly at times. The units had no air conditioning, and seeing as they frequently operated on routes with warm climates at this point, it made operating them dreadful. They also lacked any kind of soundproofing, leading Amtrak to issue out earplugs to crews.
Oh, so this is P-30CH problem is it had to be delayed dynamic brakes response, HEP failures, rough riding, truck design, no air condition, no soundproofing. Yeah, that's the problem of this locomotive. Yeah, so yeah.
Earplugs to crews. Complaints also extended to the units being overall a filthy unit to operate, belching out large amounts of smoke, and being described as gassy and oily. They sometimes even caught fire. One crew account comes from train orders user CPR Hogger, who said,
"Back in 1991, I worked out of San Antonio for Amtrak and got to run the P-30s on the Sunset quite a bit. I will never forget the night we were westbound number 1 from Houston. We were somewhere in between Houston and San Antonio on the good old SP, and I was running the engine. It was dark in the cab, and I was working with one of the old heads off the SP. Anyway, we had just crossed one of the many bridges, and I heard him yell, 'God, GE piece of shit.' I flipped on my train order light and looked across the cab, and the reason for his tirade was the window had fell out of the frame and hit my train order light and looked across the cab. 'God, GE piece of shit.' I flipped on my
Whoa.
train order light and looked across the cab, and the reason for his tirade was the window had fell out of the frame and hit him on the head.
Even with these problems,
What the heck?
P-30CHs trundled on into the 1980s, receiving a new coat of Phase 3 paint and being placed on the newly created Amtrak Auto Train running between Lorton, Virginia and Sanford, Florida. By this point in time, most units were operating in the southeast on trains such as the Auto Train, Silver Meteor, and Sunset Limited. EMD's very successful F40PH that had been put into service in 1976 had largely displaced the P30s on other corridor and long-distance services elsewhere in the country. The units made a name and home for themselves, speeding trains up and down the eastern seaboard and along the scenic route of the Sunset Limited. Ultimately, though, the P-30CH's retirement process began in mid-1991 and continued until number 705 ran for the last time on December 15, 1991 on the Sunset Limited. The P-30s were gathered at New
Sunset Limited. Speaking of Sunset Limited, like a big bayou, was derailment on. I don't know what it's on happened in Big Bayou, on Alabama. Like Amtrak A19, Amtrak 262, and Amtrak 312, both are 40 PH, and including Amtrak A19 P40 DC. 3 of the locomotives are scrapped after the aftermath the Big Bayou on Sunset Limited. But anyways, let's get back to engines.
New Orleans and were all scrapped in 1992, with the F40PH replacing the units. While the P30CH proved to be a bit of a bust for Amtrak as well as GE, it fared better than the SDP40F and had a varied 16-year career. The unit was the first all-new for Amtrak, but was the last of 6-axle diesel power, the railroad now favoring 4-axle power. In the end, whether it be their distinct GE chugging noise, aesthetic design, or iconic horns, the P30CH Pooch will always be remembered and be a part of the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation.
All aboard, America, all aboard, Amtrak.
Thanks for watching this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak. I hope you all enjoyed, and stay tuned for next time when I discuss the EMD GP40TC. Thank you again for watching.
Oh yeah, that's episode 5. Now next one will be episode 6, called my favorite one all the time, F40PH. That EMD was successor of this locomotive the whole time. Anyways, here is episode number 6, the F40PH.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today...
But hold on a second. Speaking of F40PH, do you saw Amtrak Guy 365 profile? Amtrak Guy 365 likes F40PH, and his favorite number is 365. So that's why. Anyways, let's get started.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be discussing the EMD F40PH. The F40PH needs almost no introduction, being one of the most famous and popular diesel locomotives in the United States. But to understand how it gained such a fan base and how some units are still running nearly 45 years later is what I'll be explaining today. To do that, we must go back to the year 1975. Amtrak's current fleet of inherited F and E units, the SDP40F, along with the new P30CH, started to show reliability problems. On top of this, they weren't equipped with head-end power, or HEP for short. This created a predicament for Amtrak as their new replacement fleet of Amfleet coaches were being rolled out into service and were electrically powered by HEP. Amtrak went to EMD, who had already won a deal to build Amtrak a long-distance steam-heated engine, that being the SDP40F, and a second, faster and shorter distance HEP-equipped locomotive. With that in place, EMD went back to their famous roots with a brand new F-Series locomotive. This would become known as the EMD F40PH. Dean Ellsworth was Amtrak's manager of the locomotive department and created the specifications required by the railroad. Its design was based off the successful EMD GP40-2 freight diesel, the main similarity being the engine, which was an EMD 645E3. While passenger variants of the GP40 like the GP40TC and GP40P already existed,
They weren't built for long distance or corridor service like Amtrak needed. Regarding technical specifications, the F stands for full width cowl body, the 40 for the model series, P for passenger gearing, and H for being equipped with head-end power. They're rated for a top speed of 103 miles per hour, being powered by an EMD 645E3 16-cylinder engine producing between 3,000 and 3,200 horsepower. They weigh in at 260,000 pounds. The F40 comes in at a length of 56 feet 2 inches, a width of 10 feet 7 inches, and a height of 15 feet 7.5 inches. They're equipped with head-end power using a Delco 500 to 800 kilowatt generator. Amtrak's F40 PHs came equipped with either a Nathan K5LA or P5 series air horn. Here's a few samples.
That horn's so classic.
In May of 1975,
my favorite
Amtrak
horn.
placed an order for 30 F40 PHs, being numbered 200 to 229. These units were initially rated for 3,000 horsepower, whereas later units would be equipped with 3,200 horsepower. Regardless, these new F40s were planned for service on the San Diegan, as well as unelectrified portions of the Northeast Corridor between New Haven, Connecticut, and Boston, Massachusetts. The SDP-40Fs and P-30CHs would meanwhile continue long-distance service. The F40s would then be rolled out into service beginning April 9, 1976. However, two events eventually triggered a change in Amtrak's thought process. First was the sharply declining reliability, quality, and derailment issues of the SDP-40F, which you can learn about in Engines of Amtrak SDP-40F. Second was the extreme winter of which was sharply declining reliability, quality, and derailment issues of the SDP-40F, which you can learn about in Engines of Amtrak SDP-40F. Second was the extreme winter of 1976 to 77, which suspended many of Amtrak's routes and older steam-heated passenger equipment. Luckily, though, the F40s were available and put through their paces, pulling Amfleet-equipped trains as the new coaches were quickly put on the rails. At the end of the winter season in 1977, Amtrak had a new plan. They adopted the F40PH as their new long-term locomotive power for all trains and began work with EMD to put this plan into action. The first step was trading in 40 SDP-40Fs to EMD in exchange for 132 F40PHRs numbered 230 to 361. These were F40s built using SDP-40F components like air compressors, electrical components, and they featured a larger fuel tank. Amtrak had realized the F40 was a do-it-all locomotive being suited for almost any kind of service required, whether it be long-distance trains through the mountains or fast-running corridor trains on flatlands. Other railroads like the Regional Transportation Authority, later known as Metra, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, Go Transit, Via Rail, among other groups, took notice of the F40's success and ordered their own units throughout the late 1970s and early 80s. By this point for Amtrak, the F40PH had become the poster boy for advertising and being heralded as the modern and prestigious diesel locomotive of their system. Next, 80s. By this point for Amtrak, the
Oh yeah, I like that poster in my opinion. It looks kind of funny and awesome poster that Amtrak did on this F40PH. Yeah,
F40PH had
this one I also like this. I like how to put the snow mountains on the poster,
become the poster boy.
and I like I like that poster. Yeah, I like how they put sunset on this wallpaper on this Amtrak.
For advertising and being
This
heralded
I also like this.
as the modern and
Oh, I like that one too. I like this poster too.
prestigious diesel locomotive of
Amtrak 10th anniversary, but now it's Amtrak 53 years anniversary now. Happy birthday to Amtrak to 53 years anniversary of it. So, anyways, like this poster though.
their system.
Next time you're planning to fly somewhere, consider going with the carrier who has spent the last 7.5 years rebuilding its entire fleet. A fleet that now offers you some of the newest, most technologically advanced equipment in the world. Not surprisingly, it's also among the most comfortable. Next time, see what a thrill it is to fly on a train. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard,
Additionally, the F-40PH would be featured in several movies and other media, further cementing its notability and being the icon of Amtrak.
Whoa!
Looks like some sort of a cow.
The F-40s would affectionately be
Wow.
nicknamed
Why
Screamer
there's-
by cruise and
why-
rail fans as to
Why there's a couch on an Amtrak F-40PH? It's kind of hilarious.
supply electricity and climate control to the coaches. The prime mover would constantly need to run at 900 RPM, thus creating a deafening roaring noise. By April 1990, Amtrak had amassed a fleet of 215 F-40 locomotives after a purchase of 6 from Go Transit. Amtrak's units numbered 200 to 415 and eventually replaced the entire SDP-40F and P-30CH fleet. Other railroads like Via Rail had managed to replace an especially old fleet of locomotives, with their variant being the F-40PH-2D. This version had desktop controls, ditch lights, and other Canadian-specific details. Furthermore, operators like Metra had a custom cab variant known as the F40PHM-2, MBTA with the lengthened F40PH-2C, and New Jersey Transit using the F40PH-2 CAT, named for its Caterpillar-built head-end power generator. Amtrak's units, despite 4 now being retired, were still providing excellent service across their system. As a matter of fact, Trains magazine estimated the average unit traveled 175,000 miles per year. Railroads like Norfolk Southern even began leasing out Amtrak F-40s for freight runs during power shortages as well. On the flip side, though, many of Amtrak's units were around 15 years old, and Amtrak had begun thinking of yet another long-term replacement engine in the late 1980s into 1990. They wanted a more fuel-efficient, lightweight, do-it-all locomotive that could also provide third rail support in tunnels out east. This would culminate in the General Electric AMD 103, better known as the P40DC, or simply Genesis. They were 25% more powerful than the F40 with 4,000 horsepower, were 22% more fuel efficient than the F40, and had a single shell body design known as monocoque for a more streamlined aerodynamic appearance. On top of this, Genesis was a fully computerized locomotive, allowing it to maintain stable operations in the case of overheating, low oil pressure, and other situations. This also helped in the reliability department. Another note was Genesis was 14 inches shorter in height, allowing for ease of operation on the Northeast Corridor's antiquated clearances. Essentially, 2 Genesis locomotives could do the work of 3 F40s, thus reducing operating costs. Clearly, Genesis was the better choice for Amtrak. In short, Genesis does what EM don't.
What? What? Are you serious? It's kind of funny. It's kind of, there's another hilarious right here.
That's a Sega Genesis Nintendo console war joke.
What Nintendo?
Anyways.
Before Genesis was put to work, GE had developed the P32-8 BWH as a stopgap measure until the P40DC was ready. In doing that, the F40s and P32s spent a good amount of time working together. Eventually, though, the P40 was rolled into service beginning in 1993, and the F40 replacement process soon began. However, rather than scrapping all of their surplus F40 PHs, Amtrak decided in 1996 up to 2007 to convert 21 units into non-powered control units, or NPCU for short. This involved removing the prime mover, traction motors, alternators, among other parts, and installed a roll-up door on the side for baggage car service. A functional control stand was left in place, though, to allow for push-pull operations. The NPCUs earned themselves the nickname Cabbage, a combination of the words cab and baggage. The first unit to get this treatment was number 368, now number operations. The NPCUs earned themselves the nickname Cabbage.
Cabbage like a vegetable thing. Get it? Anyways.
A combination of the words cab and baggage. The first unit to get this treatment was number 368, now number 90368. Despite this, some F-40s continued service in the Northeast on trains like the Maple Leaf up until around the summer of 2002. This would finally mark the end of common revenue runs for Amtrak's EMD F-40PH. Even with the F-40PH retired, holstering 26 years of service as powered units, many Amtrak F-40s still exist in some kind of service, whether that be as an NPCU on corridor trains or even in revenue service, rebuilt on other railroads as far as Canada and Panama. F-40PH number 406 notably retained its original road number and lacked a roll-up baggage door even when converted to an NPCU in 2011. After that, it was used on Amtrak's touring exhibit train. Finally, it resumed NPCU life on the Downeaster, but as of October 2020, is in the Albany, New York shops for upgrades. Regardless of individual thoughts and opinions on the F-40, its legacy and impact is undeniable. From getting Amtrak out of a power rut in the 1970s, to proving itself as one of America's most successful passenger locomotives still in revenue service today. It cemented itself as the flagship locomotive for Amtrak, became an internet meme throughout the mid to late 2000s as the flagship locomotive for Amtrak.
What the fuck is this? It says truck. It says Chuck Norris car. Where is your gun now? What the hell is? What the fuck is this? Anyways, let's continue.
Became an internet meme throughout the mid to late 2000s, and to this day is revered as a fan favorite locomotive amongst many rail fans, including myself. I mean, my icon clearly shows that you know it. Mid to late 2000s, and to this day is revered as a fan favorite locomotive amongst many rail fans. And to this locomotive for Amtrak became
It's kind of funny anyway.
An internet meme throughout the mid to late 2000s, and to this day is revered as a fan favorite locomotive amongst many rail.
LTX stand for like scrap or something.
Fans, including myself. Today is revered as a fan favorite locomotive.
Here comes my favorite one part right here.
Amongst many rail fans, including myself.
Yeah, that's you, AmtrakGuy365, the F-40PH.
I mean, my icon clearly shows that you know what I'm saying. As recent as October 2020, F-40PHR number 281 was powered up for excursions for the first time in 5 years at the California State Railroad Museum, retaining its original Phase 3 colors. Number 231 is also being restored by Dynamic Rail Preservation. While other F-40s haven't been as lucky, with many being scrapped or held in storage yards for parts, an overwhelming majority are still around today. Amtrak's F-40s witnessed nearly all of the railroad's paint schemes and have outlived much of the railroad's roster. Railroads like Metra, MBTA, Via Rail, among many others, all greatly continue the F-40 legacy, providing their units with consistent upgrades and maintenance, all to much success. The F-40 series has mastered 44 years of service as of 2020, and it certainly seems like there's more to come. The EMD F-40PH will always remain and is still part of the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this remade episode of Engines of Amtrak. Thanks a ton as usual to everyone who submitted videos and pictures to use in this video as well too. Anyway, stay tuned and join me next time when I discuss the EMD F69 PHAC and its life running with the German ICE high-speed train set. Thanks again, and I'll see you all in another video.
All right, next one is EM EM E A. Oh, hold on. AEM7. I mean AEM-7. This on episode 7. Let's watch it.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be rediscussing the EMD AEM-7. This is a remake of the original episode you can still watch as of the making of this video. The late 1970s saw Amtrak struggling to find a permanent electric locomotive to replace the old 1930s era GG1s, serviceable at best Metroliner EMUs, and rough-riding E60s. In other words, the railroad basically needed to replace everything electric and start from scratch. With that said, in 1975, Amtrak consulted the Railroad Innovative Europe for answers. Help arrived in the form of the Swedish-built RC4 number 1166 and French-built Class CC 21000 numbered CC 21003. The RC4, part of the RC line of engines, was first built in 1975 as a mixed traffic engine, while the CC 21000 was first built in 1969 for express passenger trains, reaching speeds of 135 miles per hour. The RC4 arrived first in August 1976, and the CC 21000 in January 1977. These locomotives were given American modifications like a bell, cab signals, American-style couplings, painted into Amtrak colors, and given new designations. The RC4, or X995, was nicknamed Swedish Meatball, and the CC 21000, or X996, was the French Fry. They performed trial runs with test and revenue trains up to 125 miles per hour on the Northeast Corridor between 1976 and 77. While X995 was able to prove its worth matching Amtrak's timetables with relative ease, handled cold weather well, and riding the rails adequately, X996 was another story. When it was put into service under the same conditions as the RC4, Amtrak was not pleased with the results. X996 had pantograph contact issues, rode roughly, and American personnel claimed it was the locomotive's stiff suspension and truck design. French personnel, on the other hand, stated the locomotive itself was fine, but it was the shoddy American track condition that was the issue, a common trend on American railroads of the time. Both countries were correct in their own ways. American tracks were not kept up to the same degree of quality as those in France, thus, the suspension system built for French standards would not work well with American standards. After tests concluded, X995 was sent back to Sweden in May 1977. X996, after its 6-month lease was terminated early and ran only one revenue train, went back to France in June, leaving Sweden as the winner. Amtrak would then place an order in September 1977 for 30 new electric locomotives based on the RC4 at a cost of $77.8 million. This contract was awarded to Electromotive Division in Asia, with the Budd Company manufacturing the car bodies. Later in February 1980, Amtrak ordered an additional 17, bringing the total to 47 units. These units would become known as the AEM-7. The name stemming from AEM, combining the initials of builders EMD and Asia, and 7 for 7,000 horsepower. They were rated for a top speed of 125 miles per hour, produced 7,000 horsepower.
Wow, 7,000 horsepower. They're more powerful than SC6000 CW, like a CSX, or better than E60, or even more better than SD90 Mac too. That's like damn. Anyways, let's keep watching.
Horsepower and weighed in at 202,000 pounds. The locomotives had a length of 51 feet 1 inch, a width of 10 feet 2 inches, and a height of 14 feet 9.5 inches. They came equipped with Nathan K5LA air horns. Here's a few samples. Testing began in early 1980 with number 900, and revenue service began May 9, 1980, with number 901 leading a Metroliner service out of Washington, D.C. But upon introduction, the AEM-7 was quite small compared to its older counterparts. It was half the weight of the GG1 and E60 and 20 to 28 feet shorter than those locomotives as well. It was deemed the smallest and lightest high-horsepower locomotive in North America. Despite that, the meatballs, or toasters as they had been affectionately nicknamed, could hustle 8 to 10 head-end power-equipped Amfleet passenger cars with ease. They rode smoothly, were lightweight and reliable, and actually built for passenger service. The locomotives were able to handle a wide range of northeastern passenger trains.
Of course, this carrier doesn't fly through the air to Washington. It flies along the ground. Metroliner service.
With the arrival of these units, this allowed Amtrak to finally retire their old GG1s on May 1, 1981. Though the AEM-7s were deemed quite revolutionary, much like the GG1s. Car and Locomotive Cyclopedia stated, "Not since the introduction of the New York Central's J-Class Hudson steam locomotives in 1927 has a new locomotive model had such an impact on speeds and schedule upgrades." Amtrak's initial order was completed by summer 1982, with the fleet being numbered 900 to 942. In that time, AEM-7s and Amfleets had also replaced the increasingly unreliable Bud Metroliner sets. The toaster units even found themselves towing broken down Metroliner sets on the Keystone Corridor in the mid to late 1980s. In 1987, after being pleased with the reliable service, Amtrak ordered 7 more AEM-7s, with all of those being delivered by December 1988. Amtrak now had a fleet of 54 toasters numbered 900 to 953. However, on January 4th, 1987, locomotives 900 and 903 would be involved in a serious head-on collision with 2 Conrail engines at Chase, Maryland. The Conrail crew had been smoking marijuana cigarettes and failed to call out signals, thus leading them onto the main line. Amtrak number 94, the Colonial, ran into the Conrail engines at 108 miles per hour. Of the 660 passengers, 164 were injured, 14 died, including an Amtrak engineer and lounge car attendant. Both Amtrak locomotives were also destroyed.
Oh yeah, that's the second worst of Amtrak crashes. But like I said mentioned earlier, that the big volume. Oh yeah, but the worst Amtrak number one and number one is Big Bayou because like I said in mission earlier, uh, like I said in the mission earlier, the Amtrak A19 F40PH uh 262 and 312 both F40PH are causing derailment in a Big Bayou. Cost 47 people are killed and 103 people are injured in the Big Bayou because a boat hits the bridge, and it happened on 2:53 a.m. back in September 22nd, 2020. I mean 1993. Sorry about that. Anyway, so that's one of the worst Amtrak crashes of all time. Anyways, back to that.
Meanwhile, on a more positive note, Maryland Area Rail Commuter, or MARC, and the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, or SEPTA, also ordered their own AEM-7s in 1986 and 87 respectively. New Jersey Transit received 33 ALP-44s between 1989 and 97, based on the RC6 and AEM-7. By the end of the 1990s, the AEM-7s had seen themselves painted into Phase 3 and more recently, 4. Even with shiny new paint, though, a refurbishment was in order to extend the locomotive's successful career. Between 1999 and 2002, Amtrak and Alstom cooperated in a remanufacturing program for 29 units. Alstom provided the AC propulsion equipment, electrical cabinets, transformers, head-end power, and cab displays. Their tractive effort and overall performance would be improved as well with longer trains. Alstom oversaw the operations at Amtrak's Wilmington, Delaware shops. This also coincided with Amtrak's rebranding in 2000, and were repainted into the new Phase 5, soon getting the new Travel Mark logo. These refurbished AEM-7s were classified as AEM-7AC. Not long after, in 2003, Amtrak would retire their E60 locomotives, leaving the Toasters as the primary workhorse on the Northeast Corridor, working alongside the recently introduced HHP8 and high-speed Acela Express. The ever-so-popular and reliable Toasters would then continue shuttling mail and passengers up and down the NEC for the remainders of the 2000s and much of the 2010s. Though, after 30 years of service by 2010, the Toasters were due to be replaced at some point. Amtrak placed an order for 70 Siemens ACS-64 locomotives to replace their fleet of AEM-7s and HHP-8s. ACS-64 revenue service began February 7, 2014. Amtrak would begin retiring, scrapping, and recycling their AEM-7s, with number 942 and 946 being the last remaining units. On June 18, 2016, a farewell excursion train ran between Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Stops were made for photos, and a tour of Amtrak's Wilmington shops was offered too. Afterwards, the 36-year career of Amtrak's AEM-7s would be officially penned for the history books. Post-retirement, 915 would be sent to the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania in Strasburg in summer 2015. 942 and 928 would be sent to the Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado in July 2017. The Illinois Railway Museum would receive 945 in March 2018, and Caltrain would receive number 929 and 938 in June 2019 to test their new overhead electric system in preparation for their EMU sets. Any other
Oh yeah, I've seen this before. I've seen this before since I saw it on the Kimberly post last time. Yeah. Or I think it's back in 2022. I think, but no. Anyways.
to test their new overhead electric system in preparation for their EMU sets. Any other Amtrak AEM-7 has either been destroyed in an incident, stored, or scrapped. Other railroads like New Jersey Transit retired their units in 2012, many of which are still in storage looking quite rough. MARC retired their units in April 2017 and SEPTA in December 2018. SEPTA, however, does still roster a few AEM-7s and a single ALP-44 for use on nightly fall wash trains, cleaning the rails of leaves and oily residue. But what about the European units that started it all? CC 21003 became CC 6577, was withdrawn from service in 2005, and eventually scrapped. RC4 number 1166, the basis of the AEM-7, remains in service with green cargo as of the making of this video. 1166 gained a plaque acknowledging its time in America, but apparently it was stolen. Amtrak's AEM-7s were just what the railroad needed to provide fast and reliable service to the Northeast Corridor. They were an iconic symbol of the Northeast and revitalized the corridor's train service with their quaint, boxy design paired with a rake of Amfleet coaches. Even if Amtrak no longer rosters the Toasters, a few have been preserved for all to see, and they'll still continue serving in limited service elsewhere, for however long that may be. The AEM-7 definitely left its mark on the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. But you know what they say about toasters, right?
You know what they say, all toasters toast toast.
Ha ha ha. Yeah, I forgot. EM7, the toaster unit. Ha ha. Anyways.
Thanks for watching this remade edition of Engines.
All toasters toast toast.
Thanks for watching this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak. Like I mentioned at the start, you can still go watch the original episode as of the making of this one. Thanks to those who sent in pictures and videos to be used in this episode as well. Stay tuned for next time where I'll rediscuss the GE
Oh yeah, sorry for pausing.
and videos to be used in this episode as well. Stay tuned for next time where I'll rediscuss the GE P32-8 BWH. Thank you again for watching.
Oh yeah, toaster units. Alright. Episode 7 was done. Next episode is episode 8. It's GP40TC. I'm not huge fan of that, but in my opinion. So yeah. Anyways, here's episode 8 of this locomotive.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be discussing the EMD GP40TC. Amtrak, since its inception in 1971 up to 1988, had been using a hodgepodge of locomotives for use in maintenance, switching, and backup power service. Some examples were the GP7 and GP9, SW1 and SW1200, and RS3. While serviceable for Amtrak's needs, they weren't meant to last forever, so a change was in order. Amtrak was also in need of new locomotives with head-end power, as new F40PHs still continued to roll in. An answer to Amtrak's power needs came about in 1988 from neighboring Canada. But with that said, I think I need a qualified Canadian to introduce this locomotive for me. He hails from Manitoba, is quite the Sonic the Hedgehog aficionado, and he created the popular series, Engines of Amtrak. The other Engines of Amtrak.
Okay, another one. What the fuck? Okay, it's getting out of content over here. Anyways, I don't know why.
His name? The Winnipeg Railfan.
Hey guys, this is the Winnipeg Railfan here, and I've successfully taken over Jared's YouTube channel. Yay! Now you can expect Crashes in Trains 12 Part 5, Engines of New York Central, and all those other goodies that were canceled. But now they're not, because I'm running this channel now. Ordinarily, this is where I'd introduce some stupid locomotive not related to Amtrak at all, like, say, the New York Central GP20, but I've agreed
to abide by certain restrictions.
Anyway, upon Government of Ontario Transit, or GO Transit's creation in May 1967, it was decided for motive power to convert already successful freight locomotives into passenger specifications. This was in the case the commuter system failed, and then the equipment could be sold off more easily. One locomotive GO used early on was the GP40TC. They were built by General Motors Diesel at the GMD plant in London, Ontario, between 1966 and 1968. These locomotives were clearly based on the rather successful freight diesel, the EMD GP40, which had been in production since 1965. Regarding technical specifications, the GP stands for General Purpose Locomotive, 40 for the series number, and TC for Toronto Commuter. They were rated for a top speed of 77 miles per hour, being powered by an EMD 645E 16-cylinder engine producing 3,000 horsepower. They weighed in at a lean 264,000 pounds. It came in at a length of 62 feet 8 inches, a width of 10 feet 4 inches, and a height of 14 feet 6 inches. They were equipped with head-end power utilizing a 500 kilowatt EMD 12V-149 engine and generator. The units also came equipped with Nathan K3H air horns. Compared to their freight counterparts, they stand 3 feet longer due to the need for head-end power and were built using an SD40 shell. Their noses are also much stouter, being 60 inches instead of the standard 81 inches. GO's order arrived months before passenger service began, and in the meantime, they were operated by Canadian National in freight service. 8 units were built between 1966 and 1968, being numbered 600 to 607. While the units did prove well for GO's need of speedy commuter trains, they did have a couple of issues. One of those being the HEP generator created a shrill whining noise. This annoyed the residents of communities near the railroad's Willowbrook Yard, and to fix this, GO installed line-side power, allowing them to shut down the HEP generators during layovers. The second issue was the HEP generator was in a relatively cramped space, making maintenance difficult. As time went on into 1975, though, GO had the HEP system rebuilt and extended to the rear edge of the frame, thus eliminating any way to walk around the engine on the walkway. That same year, the units were renumbered as Units 500 to 507. Well, I guess that's it for my little appearance on this episode of Engines of Amtrak. Thanks, Amtrak Guy, for having me on, and I, along with everyone else watching this channel, looks forward to another episode of the Marysville Railroad Stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the Winnipeg Rail Fan. Alright, that's enough. Good night, girl. I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, Q. Okay, Q. Please stop, please. Anyways.
Right. Thank you to the Winnipeg
Oh, thank goodness that's over, I guess. LOL. LO.
Rail Fan for helping to introduce this locomotive. By 1988, GO Transit was looking for a more modern and economical locomotive to replace their aging fleet. That answer was the F59PH. As the locomotive was rolled into service that year, the GP40 TCs were sold off to Amtrak. Under their ownership, they were renumbered to 192 through 199, and Amtrak shortened the long hood of the locomotive so crews could walk around the rear of the engine body. Additionally, Amtrak fitted a sizable piece of sheet metal bearing the railroad's name to the front of the locomotives. Also on the front, towards the left side of the nose on the units, a cab signaling box was added. The units were also equipped with Nathan K5LA air horns. Initial service involved being placed on short-haul corridor trains and acting as backup or helper power on various trains. Into the early 90s, more specifically 1991, Amtrak leased 11 GP40s from Helm Leasing. These were numbered 650 to 664 and were re-geared for higher speed running. The downside, though, was they lacked head-end power, but were able to pass it through to the coaches from an F40PH or GP40TC. Amtrak's reasoning for these temporary units was to fill a brief power shortage brought on while waiting for GE's then new P32-8 BWH locomotive to be delivered. While in service, the GP40s trailed on trains or occasionally used in work train service. They'd be returned to Helm Leasing in the late 90s as the new Dash 8s and Genesis locomotives rolled in. By this point, Amtrak had started putting the TCs onto work trains and using them in switching operations as well. They also started to appear more frequently in the northeastern part of the US. A couple of years later, into August 1998 at Wilmington, Delaware, GP40 TC number 199 was rebuilt into work train specifications. This involved a new turbocharger, ditch lights, and a new cab signal unit. The front nameplate was also removed. Other units would get similar treatment in the coming months and years, while 195 was, for a time, assigned to the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area to switch express boxcars. These units were now being designated the GP40PH. Also in 1998, Amtrak acquired 5 rebuilt EMD GP38-3s for work train and switching duties. These notably featured a gray and black scheme. Moving on to the 21st century, Amtrak's GP40PHs were renumbered to 520 to 527. This was to accommodate the arrival of new P42DCs. Into June of 2004, Norfolk Southern was contracted out by Amtrak to rebuild all 8 of their GP40PHs. NS would rebuild the units at their Juniata shops in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and they'd be designated the GP38-H3. Modifications included replacing the turbos with blowers resulting in 2,000 horsepower from the previous 3,000, along with upgrading the head-end power system and painting the units into Phase 5. The locomotive's designation came about from the 38 being the series number after the horsepower reduction, the H standing for head-end power as the units would retain it, and 3 denoting it was the third variation of its kind. These new units would begin service primarily on northeastern work trains and switching jobs in late 2004 and throughout 2005. They also acted as backup power in case power was unavailable or failed on a nearby train. From there on out, Amtrak's GP40 TCs continue to do what they do best. And allow Amtrak to keep their northeastern rail network up to snuff. After over 50 years of being on the rails, it's safe to say that Amtrak's Canadian Jeep will continue to leave their mark in the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this episode of Engines of Amtrak. Thanks to everyone who submitted photos, videos, and information for this episode as well. Anyway, stay tuned for next time when I rediscuss the fan favorite EMD F40PH. I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you again for watching.
Alright. Now let's watch in episode 9. Amtrak AMD F69PH AC. They're never used a lot.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be discussing the EMD F69PH AC and its experience with the German ICE high-speed train set. Today we're going back to 1989. Up to this point, American diesel locomotives were powered through means of direct current, or DC, as opposed to alternating current, or AC. The simple difference being with DC, electricity only flows in one direction, whereas AC will flow in more than one direction. In June of 1989, direct, or AC. The simple difference being with DC, electricity only flows in one direction, whereas AC will flow in more than one direction. In June of 1989, General Motors Locomotive Group, Siemens, and Amtrak were about to conduct an experiment. Wanting to test the viability of an AC-powered locomotive, the F69PH AC was born as the first AC traction locomotive for North American markets. 2 of them, to be specific. Using a modified F40PH car body, these locomotives were essentially an F59PH with AC power. They used 2 state-of-the-art 3-phase traction converters and then a third inverter to supply power to passenger cars. The technical specs were as follows. The F stands for full-width cowl body, 69 for the model number, P for passenger gearing, H for being equipped with head-end power, and AC for being powered through alternating current traction motors. They were rated for a top speed of 110 miles an hour, being powered by an EMD 710G3 12-cylinder engine, producing 3,000 horsepower. The locomotives weighed in at 262,000 pounds. They come in at a length of 58 feet 2 inches, a width of 10 feet 3 inches, and a height of 15 feet 7.5 inches. The F69s were equipped with head-end power using an 800 kilowatt HEP inverter. The units were equipped with Nathan K5LA air horns. Here's what they sounded like. The duo were numbered 450 and 451 and first used by the United States Department of Transportation and extensively tested in Pueblo, Colorado. Later in the fall of 1990, 450 and 451 released out to Amtrak for additional revenue service test runs. In doing that, they were painted into Phase 3. Both units were placed on short and long-distance trains alike and proved to accelerate rather quickly with their trains. Oftentimes as well, a dynamometer car would be placed on the test runs to monitor performance. Throughout 1990, the units racked up thousands of miles in Amtrak service until being sent back to EMD in LaGrange, Illinois in 1991. They would, however, reappear a bit in Amtrak service during 1992. Meanwhile, Amtrak was looking for a viable high-speed train set for their Northeast Corridor. This would result in a visit from Europe in the form of 2 high-speed train sets. These were the Swedish X2000 and the German Intercity Express 1, better known as ICE-1. These tours deserve their own video, so I won't be going into too much detail about them. Anyway, between June and December of 1993, the ICE would conduct revenue test runs on the Northeast Corridor, along with touring the United States for promotional and demonstration purposes. Both F69 units would power the train set throughout the rest of the country, which lacked any overhead wires. The units were additionally painted up in a unique ICE livery for the 25-city trip. Both units were quite fitting for the train as well, given the ICE was built by Siemens, of which the F69s were as well. The tour was received quite well, with onlookers and passengers being rather impressed. On December 17th, the tour and demo runs were completed and the train set would be returned back to Germany. This ultimately, though, would be the F69 duo's final assignment. The units were returned to EMD shortly thereafter for more presumable tests. Several years later in 1999, they were retired and then sold off to National Railway Equipment in Mount Vernon, Illinois. They were stripped of numerous parts and may or may not be scrapped in the future. Information on their current status is very limited, so I'm not sure exactly what condition they're in right now.
While Amtrak didn't take the F-69 and run with it as their own locomotive, it at least paved the way for future AC locomotive development like the EMD SD60 Mac, proving the reliability of EMD's AC traction system. This would then lead to engines like the SD70 Mac, being the first successful AC traction diesel locomotive in North America. On the competing side, there was GE's AC4400CW, and soon enough, almost all future American diesel locomotives would use AC traction. Also, the F-69's cab design would be reused on Metra's F40 PHM-2s, first introduced in 1991. Amtrak, in the end, proved to be more of a catalyst for testing the F-69's performance. Regardless, even if the F-69 PHACs didn't last long with Amtrak, they'll always remain a part of the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this episode of Engines of Amtrak. Sorry this one was a little bit shorter. There really wasn't a whole lot of information on this engine, to be honest, considering it didn't really last long with the railroad. Either way, stay tuned for next time when I rediscuss the Acela Express. I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you again for watching.
Alright. Alright, that's a nice episode. That was all. Yeah, that's a nice episode. Yeah, I wish I don't know this show will bring back in service ever again. Oh, here comes my another favorite locomotive next because coming up next is P32 8BWH, or as known as P32-8WH. That's on episode 10. Let's watch it.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be rediscussing the GE P32-8BWH. This is a remake of the original episode. You can still watch as of the making of this one. Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be rediscussing the GE P32-8BWH. This is a remake of the original episode. You can still watch as of the making of this one. Amtrak's large fleet of trusty F40 PHs were getting up in age from use on long-distance and inner-city trains, and a long-term replacement would be needed. They'd been serving the railroad since 1976, and now it was the year 1990. Amtrak went with General Electric for their new locomotive, codenamed AMD 103. It was to be a next-gen locomotive, being more streamlined, computerized, and faster too. Now that's all well and good, except there was a delay.
Oh no, this is horrible!
Details on this delay are slim to none, but apparently due to the complexity of the design, it was a long enough delay to cause a brief panic for Amtrak. Until the next-gen locomotive could be delivered, a stopgap engine would be required to supplement the F40s. So, in late 1991, GE reworked the 1984 B32-8 freight diesel for the railroad. This locomotive was owned by the Burlington Northern and Norfolk Southern. The modification resulted in the P32-8BWH, or B32-8WH, or P32-8, or just -8 when mentioned contextually with Amtrak. The P stands for passenger gearing, 32 for 3,200 horsepower.
I think I prefer B32-8WH because sounds perfect name to me in my opinion. Anyways.
-8 for the model series, B for the B-B wheel arrangement, W for wide cab, and H for being equipped with head-end power. They're rated for a top speed of 103 miles per hour, being powered by a GE 7FDL 12-cylinder engine, producing 3,200 horsepower. They weigh in at 274,890 pounds. The Dash 8 comes in at a length of 66 feet 4 inches, a width of 9 feet 11 inches, and a height of 15 feet 4 inches. They come equipped with Nathan K5LA air horns. -8s were pushed into service throughout December 1991 into 1992, numbered 500 to 519. They received a unique variation of Phase 3 paint using darker shades of Amtrak's standard red and blue, along with gray and silver. A stripe design was employed to convey a sense of speed. It was also reminiscent of Amtrak's then-current Arrow logo. This design earned them the nickname Pepsi Can and
Pepsi and hockey stick. Yeah, I prefer the Pepsi. I prefer the Pepsi Unity because that's my favorite one. And my favorite soda, my favorite soda, along with Coca-Cola, Sprite, or Mountain Dew, or others, etc. So yeah.
hockey stick. They'd initially see service primarily on Western long-distance trains. While slow to build up power and speed, the locomotives proved fairly successful, often leading or assisting F-40s with their trains. With this success, Amtrak was safe for now. Come mid-1993, Amtrak's next-gen AMD 103, better known as the P40DC or Genesis locomotive, finally arrived and was put to service. Dash 8's number 501 and 502 had been sold to the California Department of Transportation. In 1994, they were renumbered to 2051 and 2052 and given the Amtrak California brand of paint for use on the Capitol Corridor and San Joaquin trains. Meanwhile, throughout the mid to late 1990s into 2001, the P40s would replace the F40s as primary locomotive power. As a result, the Dash 8s would be displaced to basically whatever job needed doing, whether it be leading a train, backup power for a failed engine, switching, or other odd jobs. Because they were hood units, wherein the body doesn't take up the width of the frame, they were quite versatile for leading trains or switching. To this day, that's essentially remained the case. Between 1999 and 2000, they would receive Phase 4 paint. Throughout the late 2000s into summer 2016, all 18 of them were painted into Phase 5 and remain in service, along with the California units. In retrospect, Amtrak's Dash 8s were a stopgap measure due to the P40DC's production being delayed, and then they went on to do pretty much whatever needed doing on the railroad. They're quite the versatile utilitarian locomotive, so they'll probably be around a while longer. Chances are you'll still run into them as they roam Amtrak's network. The Pepsi cans have definitely left their mark, and as of now, continue to make their mark on the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak. Thanks to those who sent in pictures and videos to be used in this episode as well. Stay tuned for next time where I'll rediscuss the GE Genesis series. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in another video.
Alright, that's episode 10. The next one will be another my favorite one is Amtrak Genesis, aka Amtrak Genesis. My other favorite locomotive, and I've seen that locomotive since September 30th, 2023 on while I was on Chicago vacation. Anyways, here comes the episode 11 of Genesis Amtrak.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be rediscussing the GE Genesis series of locomotives. This is a remake of the original episode. You can still watch as of the making of this video. Amtrak's large fleet of trusty F40 PHs were getting up in age from use on long-distance and intercity trains, and a long-term replacement would be needed. They'd been serving the railroad since 1975, and now it was the year 1990. Wait a minute. I said this exact thing in the previous episode. Alright, I'm just gonna play a clip from the Dash 8 episode because I already explained the backstory for the Genesis in that one. Amtrak went...
Of course you are.
General Electric for their new locomotive, codenamed AMD 103. It was to be a next-gen locomotive, being more streamlined, computerized, and faster too. Now that's all well and good, except there was a delay.
Oh no,
Not this again?
this is horrible.
Details on this delay are slim to none, but apparently due to the complexity of the design, it was a long enough delay to cause a brief panic for Amtrak. Until the next-gen locomotive could be delivered, a stopgap engine would be required to supplement the F40s. Alright, back to reality. The stopgap was the P32-8BWH in 1991, a conversion of the B32
Okay, that was weird. Anyways.
-8 freight diesel. However, the new AMD 103 would be a completely new design, with no basis in freight-oriented motive power. After a couple of years of extra work in mid-1993, the first AMD 103 was ready. AMD stood for Amtrak Monocoque Diesel, monocoque extending from the locomotive's body being one single piece, allowing for a lightweight aerodynamic design. This was created by industrial designer Cesar Vergara. The 103 stood for a top speed of 103 miles per hour. Their later designation was P40DC, P for passenger gearing, 40 for 4,000 horsepower, and DC for direct current traction motors. They were powered by a GE 7FDL 16-cylinder engine, and their overall weight was 268,240 pounds. The P40s came in at a length of 69 feet, a width of 10 feet, and a height of 14 feet 4 inches. They came equipped with a Nathan K5LA air horn. The P40DC had several immediate benefits over the F40PH. It was fully computerized, featuring digital screens of the locomotive's status and performance. It also allowed the locomotive to keep itself in good working order in the event of overheating or low oil pressure, for example. The locomotive was lighter weight and more aerodynamic, allowing for faster speeds and a 25% increase in fuel efficiency. It was more powerful, and also shorter in height to negotiate tight clearances in the Northeast Corridor. Comparing a P40 to an F40, the 1.2-foot height difference is pretty apparent. There was a small control stand and cab at the rear to allow for easier backup moves, and the front cab interior was also quieter and more comfortable for crews. One flaw by comparison, though, was the monocoque design made it more costly and time-consuming to provide maintenance. Amtrak introduced the P40 at Washington Union Station during an event on May 11, 1993. Later in June, the first units were deployed to the auto train. In 1995, a third rail-compatible variant of the P40 was introduced, known as the P32ACDM. Metro North got their own units around the same time too. It was reduced to 3,200 horsepower, weighed 6,160 pounds more, but retained the rear cab stand, could reach speeds of 110 miles per hour, had AC power, and was a dual-mode locomotive, allowing it to operate with diesel or third-rail electric power. These replaced the nearly 40-year-old FL9 locomotives inherited from Penn Central, which inherited them from the New Haven Railroad. The P32s were built for trains coming into and out of New York City's Penn Station, where diesel fumes on the underground terminal tracks are prohibited. Both the P40DC and P32ACDM were quite successful, and thus Amtrak began to sideline their F40s. In 1996, Amtrak ordered 98 new P42DC locomotives. These were upgraded P40s featuring 4,250 horsepower and a top speed of 110 miles per hour. Other differences included no cab control stand at the back, no strobe lights, and a solid Phase 3 stripe pattern instead of a fading one. Speaking of paint, the Genesis solid Phase 3 stripe pattern, no cab control stand at the back, no strobe lights, and a solid Phase 3 stripe pattern instead of a fading one.
Yeah, you can see right here. This is all. I know the bowl looks same, but the bowl look different because of fade right here, and this is not fade. So that's a difference of this two locomotive.
Speaking of paint, the Genesis units would begin to receive Phase 4 paint in 1997, with a Northeast Corridor variant featuring a charcoal gray color running across the top. From 1999 to the fall of 2000,
But speaking of paints, the paint was 184 2011. 1971 to 2011 unit was now removed back in 2023, and now it would be replacement is Amtrak 164 for replacement. So yeah.
Gray color running across the top. From 1999 to the fall of 2000, P42 number 100 received a special paint scheme.
Speaking of Amtrak 100 P42 DC, there was once made on back in 20 back in 3 years ago. They received the new coat of paint of the midnight blue paint scheme on Amtrak 100. So yeah.
Sponsored by the United States Postal Service. This was for the Century Express, a promotional train celebrating the past 100 years through stamps. Phase 5 paint would be introduced in 2000, later revised in 2001, as part of Amtrak's rebranding project. With the introduction of the P42, these further pushed the F40s into retirement, as the former became the new poster boy for the railroad's advertising.
Oh yeah, the F40PH replacement. But I still like this poster though of this locomotive. So yeah.
By October 2001, the last P42 was built, and that December, the last of Amtrak's F40s were retired as a new generation of power took over. The railroad had amassed a fleet of 44 P40s, 18 P32 ACDMs, and 207 P42s. Some, however, had been destroyed in wrecks throughout the 1990s. Either way, that's still 269 Genesis units built for.
Again, Amtrak A19 also still so wreck in a big bayou. Anyways, this is the last time saying that. Anyways.
For Amtrak alone. The success of the Genesis led Canada's Via Rail to order 21 units, intending to replace their LRC. Led Canada's Via Rail to order 21 units.
I like how Via squeezed the GE. That's kind of funny and hilarious.
Intending to replace their LRCs, FP9 ARMs, and some of their F40s. These went into service throughout late 2001 into 2002. Amtrak, meanwhile, continued using their Genesis units on all sorts of trains, whether it be fast intercity routes on the flatlands or long-distance trains crossing rugged mountains and deserts. The Genesis could do it all. The Genesis influence spread further in 2003, when Alstom built the PL42AC exclusively for New Jersey Transit. Its design was based on the P42 with some more technical upgrades. As much as Amtrak was enjoying their new toys,
that's another hilarious and funny I seen, in my opinion. That's kind of funny.
Throughout the 2000s, Amtrak began to reduce their Genesis fleet. Slightly. In 2005, Amtrak began to reduce their Genesis fleet.
Oh yeah, speaking of that Mickey Mouse, my favorite sister Danielle likes or loves Mickey Mouse. My favorite sister Danielle likes it. Anyways.
Slightly. In 2005, 8 P40s were leased and later sold to the Connecticut Department of Transportation for service on the Shoreline East, and 4 were sold to New Jersey Transit in 2007. These were later sold to ConDOT in 2015. By the late 2000s, Amtrak's oldest P40s had been in service for upwards of 16 years and could have probably used a tune-up. As part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, Amtrak was able to upgrade 15 P40s to P42 technical specifications from 2009 to 2011. Those that were not refurbished were moved into storage in late 2012. Also in 2011, to celebrate Amtrak's 40th anniversary.
Oh yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Amtrak 184 was now painted to Phase 5 paint scheme, unfortunately. But now it was replaced by Amtrak 164 of this unit. So yeah. Anyways, let's continue.
4 units were painted into former Amtrak paint schemes. From that point onward, the Genesis series would remain Amtrak's primary locomotive power, and it has remained as such to the present day. What, the episode's not done? I have to actually talk about the Siemens Charger in this series? Alright, fine. I'll do it.
This is kind of funny. Anyways.
Just roll the tape.
Wait, Genesis, like a Sonic? Like a Sonic games? Haha. Anyways.
By 2014, Amtrak's Genesis units had been in service for around 20 years. Technology had advanced a lot since the 90s, so they began looking for an even more modern replacement. This time they were focusing on the faster state-funded intercity trains. Amtrak turned to German manufacturer Siemens for an answer. The answer being the SC44 Charger. Enhanced computer and diagnostics technology, fewer emissions, a lighter weight, and an increased top speed of 125 miles per hour were the main selling points. The first Charger was unveiled on March 26, 2016. Test runs began in 2017, with revenue service beginning towards the end of the year. On Amtrak Midwest routes, the Chargers began replacing the P42s from 2018 into 2019. The displaced P42s were simply put into yards in case of an emergency or for service on other trains. The Chargers were able to accelerate and brake rather quickly, reaching top speeds with ease. They were not without their faults, though. I'll save the detailed explanation for the eventual Charger episode, but in short, they're prone to break down in cold and snowy weather and have computers and other electronics that malfunction quite often. Amtrak persisted and kept the Chargers on, while the P42s were relegated to other trains. In 2021, to celebrate Amtrak's 50th anniversary, 5 P42.
Oh yeah, my favorite one is this one, 160, 161, and 108. But what about these three? I'll say that one are good, and this was also good, and this one are probably okay or good. I'll say this, in my opinion, will be good and okay in my opinion. So yeah.
Received special paint schemes to commemorate the occasion. The P42s would continue regular service until February 8th, 2022, when the first ALC 42s rolled.
Here it comes, the P42 replacement, but P42 still runs, so this doesn't matter if this doesn't matter if P42 doesn't retire. That's good news.
Rolled out onto revenue rails. The inaugural run, though, was hampered by a positive train control issue, requiring a P42 to be added to the front. The ALCs are Chargers built for long-distance service, intending to replace the Genesis roster. They're more fuel efficient and produce fewer emissions. They also have additional positive train control systems, larger fuel and sand tanks, and a more powerful generator. These units have basically the same issues as the SC44s, now including brake and axle lockups. Despite these issues, Amtrak is continuing with their Charger orders, looking to receive all 75 initial units by 2024. The P32 ACDM is to be replaced by the ALC 42E sometime in the late 2020s as part of the Amtrak Aero fleet. As for the remaining Genesis units, the majority of them remain in service, in storage, or as backup power for a Charger failure. Some P40s have since been sold to Larry's Truck and Electric as well. Regarding their future, no one can be quite too sure what will happen to them. Maybe a couple will be preserved in museums, while many others will face the scrapper's torch at some point. Regardless, Amtrak's Genesis line of locomotives continue to ride the rails until their final days eventually come. They've been the face of the railroad for nearly 30 years now. The Genesis, with its distinct chugging noise, will eventually give way to the quieter hum of the Chargers. No matter, they have definitely left their mark and continue to leave their mark on the history book of Amtrak.
the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak. Thanks to those who sent in pictures and videos to be used in this episode as well. Stay tuned for next time where I'll rediscuss the Bombardier Alstom HHP-8. I'll see you in another video.
What the heck? Anyways, yeah, that's all about Genesis episode 11. And yes, I'm wearing FP42 on my profile on StreamYard. Like, I'm wearing this on Genesis Locomotive for some reason. LOL. Anyways, next 12 episode is Amtrak EEMD F59 PHI.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here. On this edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be taking a look at the EMD F59 PHI, something I originally wasn't going to cover, but after many requests to do it, and my own change of mind, let's get right into it. For years now, the F59 PHI has been a staple of Amtrak's system on the West Coast. Not only that, but they found busy work on several other passenger railroads across the United States and Canada. Their iconic wedge shape and three-window design give them a unique identity of their own. However, though, they didn't just appear out of nowhere with no basis whatsoever. There's a bit of backstory. So, let's travel back to the year 1988. The Commuter Railroad Government of Ontario Transit to the year 1988. The Commuter Railroad Government of Ontario Transit, better known as GO Transit, had been using a selection of aging diesel locomotives on their commuter services, those of which were the GP40TC, F40PH, and the FP7 dating back to the early 1950s. After GO officials argued a strong case for a 3,000 horsepower passenger locomotive powered by a 12-cylinder 710 G3 engine, that of which had an independent HEP engine generator set housed in a full cowl car body with a CN-style comfort cab. With that said, the F59PH was rolled out of the London, Ontario shops in May of 1988. Its technical design took influence from EMD's 1985 freight diesel, the GP59. Essentially, the F59PH was a GP59 with an HEP generator, full-width cowl body, and a three-window Canadian comfort cab. It worked out fairly well for GO Transit, with a handful of locomotives remaining in service today as of 2020. In 2010, 4 units were sold to the North Carolina Department of Transportation for use on the jointly Amtrak and NC-DOT-operated Piedmont service, where they remain today. Fast forward a couple years after GO debuted the F59PH to 1990 in California. The state had initiated a plan to provide $3 billion towards the state's transportation department, Caltrans. A large sum of this money went to rail transportation. Part of this plan included expanded state funding Amtrak services featuring new locomotives. Before this plan, Amtrak San Joaquin and Capital Trains had been using standard Amtrak equipment like F40PHs, Dash 8s, Amfleets, and Horizons, and was merely branded as Amtrak California based on the name alone. This brand, which was used by Caltrans, didn't have an identity of its own either, as it used standard Amtrak colors. While looking for a new locomotive, Amtrak wasn't too impressed by the F59PH initially due to its lack of streamlining, which to them would easily affect fuel consumption, speed, and modernity. With that said though, Amtrak decided to take on the F59PH in a different way, through streamlining that is. EMD and Amtrak worked together to create the F59PHI in 1994. With technical specs in mind, the F stands for full-width cowl body, 59 denoting the series number, P for having passenger gearing, H for being equipped with head-end power, and I standing for having an isolated or quiet cab. The unit is rated for a top speed of 110 miles an hour, being powered by an EMD 12-cylinder 710G engine producing 3,000 horsepower. It weighs in at 270,000 pounds and has a length of 58 feet 7 inches, width of 10 feet 7 inches, and a height of 15 feet 7 inches. Compared to the F59PH, the new units have a more rounded roof compared to its predecessor, along with having streamlined skirting around the fuel tank to make it much more aerodynamic. The nose and cab, which are the most notable differences, are rounded out and the nose is detachable, being made of fiberglass. This was to make derailment repairs much easier and protect the crew. Amtrak's F59PHIs come equipped with a Nathan K5LA air horn. Here's a few samples. The PHI's technical concept would soon be adapted for the 5 feet 3 inch gauge 201 class locomotive used in Ireland. Back in the US, the very first F59 PHI, CDTX number 2001, went into service for Amtrak California on September 26, 1994. 8 other locomotives would subsequently go into service. One of the most notable differences for these units was their color scheme. Amtrak, to distinguish the state-funded Amtrak California, decked the units out in navy blue, orange, yellow, and black. This was a sharp departure from Amtrak's current scheme at the time, being Phase 4. The F59 PHI was notable in the sense of being the first locomotive to meet California's strict emission standards as well. The next year, in 1995, Amtrak California received their new bi-level commuter-based passenger cars known as California cars in colors to match the new brand identity. 2 years later, in 1998, Amtrak received 16 more F59 PHIs, 5 for the newly branded Amtrak Cascade service, and 11 for the all-new Pacific Surfliner brand. Both orders would go into service that same year. NCDOT would acquire 2 PHIs in 1998 as well. At first, Amtrak's new order F59 PHIs outside of the Cascade service that were colored using Amtrak's deep blue, platinum mist, white, and black colors were placed on the San Diegan. This color change was derived from a 1998 order of bi-level passenger cars for use on the train. On June 1, 2000, Amtrak renamed the train to the Pacific Surfliner, running between San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Luis Obispo, with the new Surfliner passenger cars going into service that year. However, the following year in 2001, EMD delisted the F59 PHI from their catalog as it was no longer able to meet Tier 1 emission standards set by the EPA. The total number of units built ceased at 83. Amtrak had a total of 36 units. Numbers 450 to 465 were painted for the Pacific Surfliner, with 465 being moved to the Cascade service in 2001, 465 to 470 for the Cascade service, and 2001 to 2015 for Amtrak California. Some of Caltrain's F59s even have names given to them by the crews. In following years, the locomotive made its mark on the west coast of America and Canada, shuttling passengers across scenic and urban areas alike. In 2009, though, saw Caltrans's F59 PHIs being repowered with a 710 Eco engine to meet Tier 2 emission standards. But as with all locomotives, there comes a time to be replaced. In May 2017, Siemens' then brand new SC44 Charger was tested on the Capitol Corridor and San Joaquin trains. Following these tests up, the Charger was placed into revenue service on the Cascades and Caltrans's routes later that year. On the Pacific Surfliner, revenue Charger service began in late 2018. But what exactly happened to the F59 PHIs? Amtrak's units found a second career in America's rail capital, Chicago, Illinois. Between October and December 2018, Commuter Railroad Metra acquired 21 ex-Amtrak units, a mixture of which were from the Surfliner and Cascades routes. These would be renumbered to 73 to 93 and painted in a temporary scheme. In August 2019, Metro began painting their units into their lightning bolt scheme. With that said, Metro's Amtrak units now work alongside ex-Go Transit F59 PHs. As for Amtrak California or Caltrans's units, along with NCDOT, they remain in regular service on their respective services as of June 2020. Amtrak has managed to hold on to a handful of their units even after 26 years in service. The PHIs have become a staple and icon of Pacific Coast Amtrak train travel, and to this day, they still continue to leave their mark in the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this episode of Engines of Amtrak. I'm glad I was able to get the community involved with this episode featuring many of your own photos and videos. So I'm very appreciative for all the help there. Anyway, stay tuned for next time when I rediscuss the GE P30CH. I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you again for watching.
All right, that's episode 12. So the next episode is Engines of HHP-8. I also never fan of these. So I think we already have like 1, 2, 3 more left. So yeah. Anyways, let's do episode 13 of this Amtrak locomotive.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be rediscussing the Bombardier Alstom HHP-8. This is a remake of the original episode. You can still watch as of the making of this one. Amtrak was gearing up for its first high-speed train throughout the mid to late 1990s. They had just finished electrifying the entire Northeast Corridor and were cooking up a high-speed train set to run the entire route from Washington, D.C. to Boston, Massachusetts. It went under the name American Flyer, later Acela Express. As part of this modernization plan, 29 of the reliable AEM-7s were slated for refurbishment, and the fickle, heavyweight E-60s were to be retired. In order to fill in for these gaps, Amtrak asked Bombardier and Alstom to not only refurbish the AEM-7s and build their new high-speed trains, but also 15 new electric locomotives. Reusing electrical drive tech from Alstom's SNCF class BB36000, these new dual-cab units were known as the HHP-8. The HH stood for high horsepower, P for passenger gearing, and 8 for 8,000 horsepower. The original designation was HHL-8, L standing for locomotive, but I don't think anyone has ever called them that. The units featured regenerative braking, meaning unused power would be redistributed into the overhead wires when braking for other trains to use. They were rated for a top speed of 135 miles per hour, produced 8,000 horsepower, and weighed in at 222,000 pounds. They had a length of 67 feet 1 inch, a width of 10 feet 5 inches, and a height of 14 feet 5 inches. They came equipped with Nathan K5LA hybrid air horns. Interestingly, the locomotives would be owned by Philip Morris Capital and released out to Amtrak. Why? I don't know. Testing commenced from 1999 into 2000, and the results proved satisfactory. Revenue service began around the end of 1999 into 2000, and they were used on whatever trains needed pulling, intercity and long distance. They were capable of hauling around 14 to 18 coaches. Maryland Area Regional Commuter Rail, or MARC, received 6 units of their own, entering service from 2001 into 2002. Visually, Amtrak's units look similar to the Acela Express. This was an intentional choice, as the Acela regional brand of trains would be a common job for the HHP-8s. Because of their shape and power, they earned nicknames like Banana, Rhino, and Hippo by crews. However, names like Banana, Rhino, and Hippo by crews. However, early in their service life, they started to reveal their many issues.
Well, come on, now what?
First of all, they had trouble swapping voltages on the Northeast Corridor. Other issues included microprocessors and cab signals malfunctioning during extreme weather. Wheel slip was a major problem, caused by the 8,000 horsepower. It was simply just too much. Slippage was especially common during snowy and rainy conditions and autumn when leaves fell on the line. This was made worse as if the unit detected wheel slip, the whole offending truck would shut down and made it difficult to get moving again. All of this soon culminated with their trucks, a design shared with the Acela, developing cracks in the brackets. In August 2002, all 15 HHP-8s, along with the Acela sets, were pulled from service to be repaired. The AEM-7s and remaining E-60s had to pick up the slack. Amtrak even had to borrow power from Mark in New Jersey Transit. After the HHP-8 quickly returned to service, Amtrak was able to retire the E-60s completely by early 2003. For a while thereafter, the HHP-8 worked fine, shuttling trains up and down the NEC. With time, however, reliability issues returned. Their outdated computers caused brake lockups, and wheel slip was a constant plague on the motors. Spare parts were also scarce due to the limited roster number. Bombardier and Alstom apparently were not very willing to help Amtrak with repairs either.
That's a dirty trick, Robotnik.
Nonetheless, they soldiered with repairs either.
That's a dirty trick, Robotnik.
Nonetheless, they soldiered on throughout the 2000s. By 2009, though, several units were constantly out of service, and they required unscheduled maintenance on average every 12 days. Clearly, change was needed. In October 2010, Amtrak ordered 70 Siemens-built ACS-64 locomotives to replace the HHP-8s and aging AEM-7s. The first ACS-64 entered service in February 2014, and the HHP-8s were promptly and completely retired by November 7th of that year. They were renumbered to 680 to 694 to avoid conflict with the ACS-64s, and are now stored at Amtrak's Wilmington, Delaware shops. Much later in November 2019, Philip Morris Capital, the company who owned the units but leased them out to Amtrak, sued the railroad. They said Amtrak owed $92.9 million out of a $250 million contract, in which they claimed Amtrak cannibalized the units for parts, which was a breach of contract. The case was settled and Amtrak cannibalized the units for parts, which was a breach.
Kid, what is this? This is can you stop fucking around? Okay, baldy, dumb meatball head. Get it? I call you baldy, the meatball head because my first sister Danielle likes to call you baldy, the meatball head, right? Right, Danielle? Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, Danielle. If you see this is baldy, the meatball head right here. Get it? Anyways.
Breach of contract. The case was settled in 2021, but the terms are unknown. So, is this the end of the HHP-8 story? Not quite.
Oh, all right. Give me the scoop, Robotnik.
Thank you, Sonic, I will.
Mark successfully refurbished their units in 2017 and continue to operate them as of the making of this video. Meanwhile, Amtrak decided to convert number 691 into a cab car in late 2022. It's been renumbered to 90691. More units may be converted to replace the old Metroliner cab cars. Amtrak's HHP-8s only lasted about 15 years. They sorta worked, but just barely. They were plagued with wheel slip and had a number of mechanical and electronic issues. No matter, it seems they still have a little bit of life left in them on MARC trains and as cab cars on home rails. They definitely left their mark and, as of now, continue to leave their mark on the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak. Thanks to those who sent in pictures and videos to be used in this episode as well. Stay tuned for next time where I'll rediscuss
What? What are you waiting for?
Seems like this was the last remake for the series. Well, I thank you very much for joining me on this.
Actually, the last remake's on SCS-64 is the last one. Sorry.
Process of remaking all the old episodes. Wasn't always easy, but I would say the results were well worth it in the end because I don't really look too fondly back on the old episodes. Some of the information wasn't accurate, and the editing is pretty bad compared to the newer episodes. Anyway, please check the pinned comment below for more details on what I'm going to do with Engines of Amtrak going forward. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another video.
Next time, see what a thrill it is to fly on a train.
And I'll see you in another video.
Well, hold on a second. We're not done here. We still have plenty of left. And after this one finished, it's finished. But this is not over yet, though.
Next time, see what a thrill it is to fly on a train.
Anyways, now we're moving on to episode 14 of this locomotive of Amtrak called...
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be discussing the Acela Express high-speed train set. High-speed rail in America is a pretty well-debated topic in modern society. At one point, it wasn't always that way. Several decades ago, the US had its fair share and was well known for its fast and streamlined trains, but a collapsing railroad industry in the 1960s and 70s led to the demise of this infrastructure. Meanwhile, in Europe and Asia, railway companies were quickly innovating and developing all-new high-speed bullet trains. The first notable example being the Japanese National Railway's Shinkansen Zero Series. The line this train operated on opened in 1964 and reached speeds of 130 miles per hour. Subsequently, there would be the British Rail Class 43 HST in 1976, French National Railway Company TGV in 1981, and German ICE-1 in 1991. Meanwhile, in the United States, high-speed rail developments were being researched and undertaken. The High-Speed Ground Transportation Act of 1965 had kick-started this after the Shinkansen success. This led to the Metroliner trains in January 1969 for operation on the Northeast Corridor, or NEC. This corridor spans between the nation's capital at Washington, D.C., 457 miles north of Boston, Massachusetts. While the Metroliners were built for 150-mile-an-hour operation, they only ended up reaching 120. This soon dropped to 110 due to the signaling systems and poor track conditions of the time. The Metroliners were also riddled with electrical and technical issues. In short, the Northeast Corridor's infrastructure at this time was rather dated, with many bridges, tunnels, and track sections being laid out during the early 1900s and even as far back as the 1870s. After Amtrak's takeover of most passenger rail in the United States in May 1971, this also involved absorbing most of the Northeast Corridor and a plentiful amount of antiquated equipment. In 1976, the Northeast Corridor Improvement Project was enacted to continue electrifying parts of the NEC and eliminate transfers to or from diesel power. This also included new locomotives and upgraded infrastructure. In the 1980s and 90s, the Federal Railroad Administration would further explore high-speed possibilities. 1992 and 93 saw a visit from Europe in the form of the Swedish X2000 and German ICE-1 train sets. These toured the country and conducted several test runs and regular runs on the NEC as potential candidates for long-term high-speed operations. The X2000 achieved a speed of 155 miles per hour, and the ICE topped out at 165 miles per hour. Both trains received very positive and hopeful feedback from passengers and railroad officials alike. Many state officials saw these trains as an opportunity to implement higher speed rail in intermediate corridors to reduce air pollution along with road and air congestion. After these trains were returned to their respective countries, Amtrak soon developed a plan for their new high-speed train set. In 1995, the name American Flyer was proposed for the trains by Canadian company Bombardier. Then, in 1996, Bombardier and Alstom would soon win a deal to build Amtrak's new high-speed train sets. For the Northeast Corridor that same year, 157 miles of the NEC between New Haven, Connecticut and Boston, Massachusetts would be electrified. This would involve 15,000 catenary poles, 140 miles of welded rail, 300,000 concrete ties, 1,550 miles of catenary wire, and 25 new power stations. Amtrak crews also realigned 127 curves, installed new signaling, lowered or rebuilt tracks and bridges to provide clearance for the electrics, and upgraded stations. 3 years later, in March 1999, Amtrak officially unveiled its detailed plan for its high-speed endeavor. For starters, American Flyer was changed to Acela Express, combining the words acceleration and excellence. Bombardier and Alstom would build 20 sets with an expected delivery date of late 1999. High-speed maintenance facilities would be built in Sunnyside Yard in Queens, New York, and Southampton Yard in Boston. Now, with regards to technical specifications for the Acela, the power cars would be rated for a top speed of 165 miles per hour, producing 6,169 horsepower each, totaling in at 12,338 horsepower. The power cars weigh in at 204,000 pounds each. The power cars come in at a length of 69 feet 7 3/8 inches, a width of 10 feet 5 inches, and a height of 14 feet 2 inches. The power cars come equipped with a Nathan K5LA hybrid air horn. Here's a few samples. The power cars are numbered 2000 to 2039. The passenger cars are numbered 3200 to 3559. As for the passenger cars, the N business and first class cars weigh in at 142,000 pounds. The other business cars at 139,000 pounds, and the bistro or cafe car weighs in at 137,000 pounds. The passenger cars come in at a length of 87 feet 5 inches, a width of 10 feet 4.5 inches, and a height of 13 feet 10 5/8 inches. Ultimately, this leads to the entire 8-car train set being 1,246,000 pounds with a length of 663 feet 8 3/4 inches. Acela and its passenger cars would be able to tilt around curves. This concept was based upon Bombardier's LRC cars built for Via Rail of Canada in 1980. As 1999 went on into September, Bombardier and Alstom told Amtrak that they needed additional construction time for further testing and modification of the wheel and suspension systems. This statement regarded excessive wheel wear and defective bolts. The deadline was pushed back to the spring of 2000 and then moved to fall. Around June 2000, Bombardier completed an experimental high-speed gas turbine locomotive called the Jet Train. It was designed in mind of making European high-speed rail more financially feasible to passenger railroads in North America. Apart from its colors, it looked almost exactly like an Acela power car and took overall inspiration from it. Although multiple tests and proposals for use of the jet train were undertaken, none of them went very far. Back to the Acela, one set had been tested at the Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado starting in mid-1999, while a second was tested on the Northeast Corridor. It would finally be on December 11th, 2000, that America's first dedicated high-speed bullet train would go into revenue service. It pulled into Boston South Station to a grand showing of fireworks and a ton of press coverage. It really was a new era for American railroading. As service got underway, the train saw a few visual changes in Amtrak's creative department. The Acela logo was drawn up as an abstraction of a turtle fin symbolizing stately and peaceful service. Amtrak's national logo had also been changed too. Older Acela sets had a red Amtrak wordmark on the nose, while newer ones lacked this in favor of the new travel mark logo. The word Acela also marked a new series of branding. Originally, a 3-level service system was envisioned for Acela. First was the Acela Express, the high-speed service. Acela Regional, the rename for Northeast Direct, Empire Service, and Keystone Corridor trains. And finally, Acela Commuter, frequently stopping rush hour service. This whole system created much confusion amongst passengers, so in 2003, the 3 levels of service system was dropped. Only the Acela Express name remained. While in service, the Acela Express averaged speeds of 82 miles an hour between Washington, D.C. and New York, and 66 miles an hour between New York and Boston. The 150 mile an hour max speed was only reached for about 33 miles in 3 sections of track in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Over the entire route, average speed is around 70 miles an hour. For the entire trip between Washington, D.C. and Boston, Acela makes the trip in about 7 hours and 7 minutes. A major restriction for the Acela was over century-old bridges and tunnels. Amtrak figured there were 224 bridges beyond their design life. Another limitation was pre-1935 built catenary support systems lacking constant tension features of the newer catenaries east of New Haven, Connecticut. Despite this, reception and ridership on the Acela Express was very positive, with passengers enjoying the downtown and suburban connection points the train offered. However, after only a year and a half in service in August 2002, Acela train sets were suddenly removed from service. It was revealed that the brackets connecting the trucks with the yaw dampers that prevented swaying were cracking. In the shops, the Acelas were given redesigned trucks and frequent inspections. Another incident took place during a hot August day in 2003. After a widespread northeast blackout occurred as a result of a software bug at a power plant, an Acela train was stranded on Hellgate Bridge for over 9 hours until a rescue engine from Sunnyside Yard arrived to tow the engine back to New York's Penn Station. Afterwards, things went well until April 2005 when cracks in the passenger car brake discs were discovered. Ironically, the Metroliner services the Acela intended to replace took over for the out-of-service train sets. On September 21st, all train sets resumed operation, and for quite some time thereafter, the sets continued normal operation, racing passengers and business folk alike up and down the Northeast Corridor. As the year 2016 wore on, Amtrak began to seek out a new high-speed train set to replace the Acela, as they were nearing 20 years old, closing in on their reliable service life. These new sets would come from Alstom and replace all 20 existing Acela sets. On August 26th, then Vice President Joe Biden announced a $2.45 billion federal loan package to pay for Amtrak's new high-speed train sets. The 28 new sets would allow for improved frequency and increased capacity on the Acela Express service. Each set would have 386 seats, which was 25% more than the current Acela. It was then on January 20th, 2017, that the Acela received presidential recognition. Outgoing Vice President Joe Biden, nicknamed Amtrak Joe, rode the train one last time out of Washington, D.C. back home to Wilmington, Delaware.
Back on Amtrak!
Biden, an avid Amtrak supporter, had traveled over 8,000 round trips on Amtrak starting in 1973 as a senator, accumulating over 2 million miles of Amtrak travel. A year later, unfortunately, a major incident with the Acela became the highlight of some news sources. On February 6, 2018, Acela Express train number 2150 split apart between the first and second cars in the set at 124 miles an hour near Havre de Grace, Maryland. Luckily, no one was injured, but this was not a good look for the train's safety record. 1 year later, though, in 2019, a minor rebranding occurred with the train. On September 23rd, the Acela Non-Stop was introduced, a direct run between Washington, D.C. and New York City. Additionally, the Express in Acela Express was dropped from all trains. From there, Acela continued a stable career until the year of 2020. I think you all know where this is going. Due to a specific global event, all Acela trains were suspended to make specific global event. I'll know where this is going. Due to a specific global event, all Acela trains were suspended to maintain social distancing measures. Service would resume June 1st. Even if service did resume, the original Acela set's days would be numbered. Amtrak's new 11-car high-speed train set, named the Avalia Liberty, began to be delivered to the railroad in February 2020. Although built for speeds of 186 to 220 miles per hour, one set was tested in Pueblo, Colorado up to 165 miles per hour. A second prototype set was delivered in March for testing along service tracks in the Northeast beginning in May. The first test over the entire corridor occurred on September 28th. These new sets feature a 30% weight reduction, an active tilt system allowing for faster speeds around curves, and along with coinciding signal and track upgrades, will allow for regular 160 mile per hour operations. If proposed infrastructure upgrades are completed, the new sets would be able to reach speeds of 186 miles per hour. The Avalia Liberty is set to enter revenue service between 2021 and 2022. Test runs of the trains are still being conducted as of the making of this video, so if you plan to catch one of these runs, perhaps this video's sponsor, Skillshare, can help. Skillshare is a great online learning service and community for people who love to be creative, like me. Whether you are a beginner or a professional looking to in my videos, well, so you don't have to use crusty 144p images from 2003 in your videos. Well, I could run so I 20 miles per hour on the street for the area where be kept taking plenty of lows pretty high premium 1000 for your
2 engines of
Thanks a ton to Skillshare again for sponsoring this video.
Now back to engines of Amtrak.
Concluding upon the Acela, the 20-year-old Acela Express train sets continue doing what they do best. Speeding passengers up and down the Northeast Corridor is not only the fastest train in the United States, but all of North America. They serve as a crucial transportation link in the most densely populated part of the United States, serving the country's busiest rail passenger stations. They've definitely made their mark, and as of now, continue to make their mark on the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this remade episode of Engines of Amtrak. Special thanks to all of those who submitted their pictures and videos for this episode as well. Now don't worry, this won't be the last episode of Engines of Amtrak like last time. There's still a few locomotives I have yet to cover and episodes I want to remake too. I plan to revisit most, if not all, of the older episodes and remake them to a standard I find suitable now. So then after those, or somewhere in between, I'll also finally get around to Engines of New York Central, if you still remember that. I hope you'll look forward to those along with next time where I'll discuss the Siemens ACS 64. Anyway, stay tuned and thank you again for watching.
Alright, now we are on the last one on the list. Episode 15, the SCS 64. Finally, this is the last one, guys, of this series. Let's watch that, shall we?
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be discussing the Siemens ACS 64. Amtrak's Northeast Corridor had been long known for a few select engines, namely the GG1, E60, AEM7, and HHP8. With time, though, the 1930s era GG1 would eventually fade out in favor of the newer AEM7. These Swedish-inspired locomotives, nicknamed meatballs and toasters, would act as the backbone of Amtrak's commuter services up and down the NEC beginning in 1978. They were boxy, quick, but most importantly named meatballs.
Oh yeah, like I said mentioned earlier, I call it, speaking of meatball and toasters, let's start with meatball first. Speaking of meatball, I call Baldy basic. I call Baldy the meatball head that my sister Danielle made of him. It makes it so funny. Anyways, the toaster. Speaking of toaster for that's kind of funny name too on toaster unit for Mario Hotel. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier. Anyways, let's continue.
And toasters would act as the backbone of Amtrak's commuter services up and down the NEC beginning in 1978. They were boxy, quick, but most importantly, reliable. They would even see a rebuild phase from 1999 to 2002 to extend their career. During the development of the Acela Express in the mid to late 1990s, the HHP8 was created and went into service between 1999 and 2001. These were made to supplement the retirement of the E60 units, along with the AEM7 units going down for maintenance. The AEM7 refurbishment program went well, giving the toasters improved technology and performance. On the other hand, the HHP8 was proving to be problematic. In 2002, all 15 locomotives were temporarily withdrawn, along with the Acela Express, due to shared cracking in the trucks. Even when fixed, the HHP8s were still no good for service. Continued issues included wheel slip, especially in the fall, microprocessors malfunctioning in adverse temperatures, cab signals failing, among other performance issues. By 2009, the locomotives were undergoing unscheduled maintenance every 12.6 days on average. This soon forced Amtrak to begin development of a replacement locomotive. However, not only would it replace the HHP8, but the AEM7 too. As was typical with Amtrak's electric locomotives, the railroad looked to Europe for inspiration. The basis for this new unit would be the Eurosprinter and Vectron series of locomotives. However, heavy modifications would be required to meet American standards. This engine would come to be known as the Amtrak City's Sprinter, and its technical name, the Siemens ACS-64. An order of 70 locomotives was placed in October 2010 at a cost of $466 million US. The locomotive would be completed with contributions from several different states and factories. As for the American modifications, positive train control or PTC, crumple zones, an anti-climber, and a much more durable cap were implemented. The locomotive, similar to the Genesis series, has a monocoque or single shell body design. Other additions included advanced safety systems and special couplers designed to prevent jackknifing or rolling over in a derailment. Compared to its predecessors, the ACS-64 would be much more energy efficient and cost-friendly to operate. They make use of regenerative braking, which when activated, feeds unused electricity back into the overhead wire system for other trains to use. With regards to technical specifications, the name ACS-64 stands for Amtrak City's Sprinters, and the 64 stands for 6.4 megawatts of power. They're rated for a top speed of 125 miles per hour and produce 8,600 horsepower. They weigh in at 215,537 pounds. They come in at a length of 66 feet 8 inches, a width of 9 feet 9.5 inches, and a height of 12 feet 6 inches. The ACS-64 comes equipped with a Nathan K5LA air horn. Here's a few samples.
Alright, actually, I was wrong. ACS-64 has the most horsepower ever had. It's 8,600 horsepower. It's even more stronger than other ones. So yeah, anyways, let's keep watching.
Amtrak's order of 70 locomotives, numbered 600 to 670, would begin delivery in February 2013. Amtrak and Siemens unveiled the first 3 completed locomotives on May 13, 2013. Testing would take place during the summer that year with numbers 600 and 601 at the Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado, and number 602 on the Northeast Corridor. With tests proving successful, revenue service would begin a little under a year later. A day prior to the first revenue run on February 6, 2014, then Amtrak CEO and President Joseph Boardman and then U.S. Vice President Joe Biden visited 30th Street Station in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to give speeches about the importance of the new locomotives and the Northeast Corridor.
We're delivering in the middle of a time that it's hard to deliver anything in this nation from infrastructure.
It's hard to imagine what life would be along the corridor without Amtrak.
Biden would also tour ACS-64 locomotive number 600. The next day on February 7th, locomotive number 600 entered revenue service as the first ACS-64 on Northeast Regional Train number 171 from Boston, Massachusetts to Washington, D.C. The first run went very well, with the train running right on time. The Sprinters would prove to be the successful and modern replacement for Amtrak's aging fleet of electric locomotives. Later that year on November 7th, Amtrak had retired the last of their HHP-8 locomotives, placing them into storage. The retired units would be renumbered to 680 to 694 to avoid duplication with the ACS-64 units. Around this time as well, ACS-64 number 600 was named David L. Gunn after Amtrak's CEO and president who led the railroad between 2002 and 2005. On another unfortunate note, on May 12, 2015, ACS-64 number 601 was involved in a derailment in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Traveling 102 miles an hour in a 50-mile-an-hour zone, the train veered off a 4-degree curve. Of the 238 passengers and 5 crew members, 8 were killed and over 200 were injured, with 11 critically injured. The National Transportation Safety Board ruled that the engineer had been distracted and lost situational awareness, leading to the crash. Another reasoning for the wreck was a lack of operational automatic train control and positive train control on that particular section of track. Amtrak would soon install ATC in the section after the derailment.
Oh yeah, coming soon on May 12th in this month, in 11 days. You should be. I'm gonna watch that or something, or see the news, or make a community post until May 12th. Until coming soon on May 12th. Anyways, let's continue.
On a more positive note, the ACS-64 would find new life on the southeastern,
along with the Southern Pacific crash in 1989 too, also comes soon. Anyways, let's get watching. Anyways, let's get watching.
On a
Sorry, I spelled wrong.
Amtrak would soon install ATC in the section after the derailment.
Anyways, let's keep watching.
On a more positive note, the ACS-64 would find new life on the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, or SEPTA. May 2015 saw the operator place an order for 13 units to replace their AEM-7s and single ALP-44. The new locomotives would be delivered to SEPTA in December 2017. Back on Amtrak, unit number 642 would be delivered with a special veteran scheme in May 2015. Meanwhile, the AEM-7s were gradually being phased out throughout 2015 and into 2016. Before they could be completely replaced, tragedy would once again strike the ACS-64s. On April 3, 2016, southbound Palmetto train number 89 struck a backhoe in Chester, Pennsylvania, derailing the train. 2 track workers were killed and 39 people were injured. Locomotive number 627 was severely damaged along with 2 passenger cars. A couple months later, Amtrak's final ACS-64 would be delivered. Number 670 was completed on June 2, 2016. Amtrak and Siemens celebrated, and it concluded with the unit being towed on Joseph Boardman's train heading for Washington, D.C. Number 670 would enter service that August. This celebration would be somewhat bittersweet, though. With all the ACS-64s now delivered, this meant the few remaining AEM-7s and their careers would soon be over. AEM-7 number 942 and 946 made their final run on June 18, 2016. The train was a farewell excursion that ran between Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia. This marked the end of an era on the Northeast Corridor, finally passing the torch over to the ACS-64s. While the Sprinters are a sharp departure in appearance from their predecessors, they continue to serve Amtrak well up until this day in 2021. They're sleek, modern, fast, and reliable. The ACS-64 has definitely made its mark, and as of now, continues to make its mark on the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this episode of Engines of Amtrak. Thanks to everyone who submitted pictures and videos for this episode as well. From here on out with the series, I'll be focusing on remaking older episodes, as the older ones aren't always the most accurate and definitely aren't the most well edited. So stay tuned for next time when I rediscuss the Turboliner train sets. Thank you again for watching. Liner train sets. Thank you again for watching.
Okay. Hold on. Alright, that's all the Amtrak reaction we have. I know it's not that now. It's been like 3 hours 15 minutes in this stream. That's a long time, a bit, but yeah, that's all the Amtrak Engines of so that's all about Engines of Amtrak by Amtrak 365. But if you haven't subscribed to me, I mean, if you haven't subscribed to him, go subscribe to him right now. About his that he made. I don't think so. Sorry. So yeah. So yeah. I think I think we're finished. So I got it. So thank you guys for watching for this stream and reaction, and thank you for watching for my reaction stream of this May 1st. And I would say happy 53 birth anniversary, happy 53 anniversary or birthday to Amtrak. So thank you guys for that, and I see you guys later. But before I gotta go, I'll make Amtrak. Before I gotta go, here's an Amtrak music video by AmtrakGuy365. Shall we? I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Maybe the time is right for taking the train instead of that flight. Going more places, really getting around. So nice taking off and never leaving the ground. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard Amtrak. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard Amtrak. So much comfort, so much to see. Travel the way travel should be. Superliners, come see what we've done, making getting there part of the fun. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard Amtrak. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard Amtrak. Same old flights, same old planes. We'll have you seen our brand new train.